You're about to witness the entire story of Ruth unfold, from tragedy in Moab to triumph in Bethlehem. We'll explore how a Moabite woman became the great-grandmother of King David, why her story is actually a beautiful picture of our own redemption, and how God orchestrated every detail to bring about his perfect plan. In this video, you'll discover how a foreign widow's bold declaration of faith became the foundation for the greatest love story ever told, and how her bloodline would ultimately lead to the birth of Jesus Christ himself. But before we dive in, if you're new to this channel, consider hitting that like and subscribe button if you haven't already. Also, let us know where you're watching from and what time it is. We're building a global community here. So without further ado, let's begin, shall we? The sun beats down on cracked earth. Bethlehem, the house of bread, sits empty. Fields that once swayed with golden grain now stretch like barren skin across the hills. The irony cuts deep. This place named for abundance holds only dust and dying dreams. Elimelech stands at his doorway, watching his neighbors pack their few belongings. Some head north toward Damascus. Others venture south toward Egypt. The great famine has reached its third year, and hope grows thin as winter wheat. His wife Naomi moves quietly through their home, counting sacks of grain that should have lasted months but now might stretch only weeks. Her hands shake slightly as she measures out portions for the evening meal. Two young sons, Mahlon and Chilion, sit in the corner, their eyes too old for their years. The family once prospered here. Elimelech's father owned good land, fertile ground that produced enough to trade with merchants heading toward Jerusalem. But the rains stopped coming. The soil turned to powder. The wells ran dry. Now each morning brings the same question. How much longer can they endure? Neighbors whisper about Moab. Strange reports drift across the Jordan River. The land beyond the Dead Sea still receives rain. Crops still grow. Markets still bustle with grain and oil and wine. But Moab means crossing into foreign territory, living among people who worship different gods, speaking a language that sounds like home but carries foreign weight. Elimelech walks to the edge of his property where boundary stones mark generations of family ownership. His grandfather placed these markers. His father defended them. Now he considers abandoning them entirely. The decision feels like betrayal. But empty stomachs care nothing for family legacy. The evening meal consists of thin barley soup and stale bread. Naomi portions carefully, ensuring each bowl holds equal measure. The sons eat without complaint, though their hunger shows in the way they scrape every drop from their bowls. Afterward, they sit in silence, listening to the wind whistle through gaps in the roof. Elimelech finally speaks the words that have haunted him for weeks. "We cannot survive another season here." His voice carries the weight of defeat. Moab offers what Bethlehem cannot: food, work, hope for tomorrow. Naomi nods slowly. She has reached the same conclusion through her own calculations. Their stored grain will last perhaps 2 more months. Their livestock grows thin despite careful rationing. Their neighbors have already begun the exodus, leaving behind empty houses and broken dreams. The decision crystallizes not in dramatic proclamation, but in quiet resignation. They will join the stream of refugees flowing eastward. They will leave behind everything familiar: the synagogue where they worship, the marketplace where they trade, the cemetery where their ancestors rest. They will carry only what they can manage on the long journey to an uncertain future. Mahlon and Chilion listen to their parents' plans with mixed emotions. Adventure calls to their young hearts, but sadness tugs at their thoughts of leaving friends and familiar places. They have heard stories about Moab, tales of strange customs and foreign gods, but also accounts of green fields and flowing streams. The famine has created a generation of wanderers. Throughout Judah, families make similar desperate choices. Some head toward Egypt, following ancient paths their forefather Abraham once walked. Others venture toward the coast, seeking opportunities in Philistine cities. Still others choose the eastern route toward Moab, gambling on reports of abundance beyond the Jordan. Elimelech spends the night walking through his house, touching walls his father built, running his fingers along wooden beams his grandfather carved. Each room holds memories that seem to whisper protests against abandonment, but sentiment cannot fill empty stomachs or plant grain in barren soil. Dawn breaks gray and lifeless across the Judean hills. The sun rises without warmth. highlighting the extent of devastation that stretches in every direction. No birds sing, no insects buzz. Even the wind seems to carry the scent of death and dust. The family begins the process of deciding what to take and what to leave behind. Clothes, tools, cooking vessels, the basic necessities of survival. Family heirlooms, furniture, books, the precious things that define identity but cannot be carried on a journey of indefinite length. Naomi wraps her grandmother's silver bracelet in soft cloth, tucking it deep into her traveling pack. Elimelech selects his father's best chisel, knowing that carpentry skills might provide income in foreign lands. The sons choose carefully among their few possessions, keeping only what fits in small bundles they can carry themselves. Word spreads quickly through the village. The family of Elimelech prepares to depart. Neighbors stop by to offer farewell wishes and warnings about the dangers ahead. Some speak of bandits along the eastern roads. Others mention the difficulty of finding acceptance among the Moabites. All acknowledge the courage required to leave everything behind. The famine has stripped away normal social barriers. Rich and poor face the same stark choices. Priests and farmers pack similar bundles. Merchants and shepherds follow the same dusty paths toward uncertain futures. Desperation creates strange equality among those who once observed careful distinctions of status and wealth. As evening approaches, the family shares what might be their last meal in the house where they have lived for generations. The familiar walls seem to press closer, as if trying to hold them back. But morning will bring departure, and the long journey toward Moab begins whether they feel ready or not. The journey to Moab. The eastern road stretches before them like a thread connecting two different worlds. Elimelech shoulders his pack, feeling the weight of everything they now own pressing against his back. Naomi walks beside him, her face set with determination that barely masks deep uncertainty. The boys follow, their young legs eager for adventure despite the sadness of leaving home. Other families join their procession as they move through the hill country. The famine has created a steady stream of refugees, all heading toward the same uncertain destination. Conversations flow in whispers, sharing rumors about conditions ahead and warnings about dangers along the way. The first day's travel takes them through familiar territory. They pass villages where relatives live, seeing the same signs of devastation everywhere. Empty grain stores, abandoned houses, fields that should be green with spring growth but show only stubble and stones. The landscape tells the story of a land under judgment, though no one speaks such thoughts aloud. Water becomes their first concern. The springs that should flow fresh and clear offer only muddy trickles. Wells that once provided for entire communities now barely sustain the families who remain. The travelers must plan their route carefully, moving from one water source to the next, hoping each will provide enough to sustain them for the journey ahead. Elimelech carries a leather map, drawn by a merchant who has traveled this route before. The scratched lines show the path toward the Jordan River, marking places where water might be found and warning of areas where bandits have been reported. The map offers guidance, but no guarantees of safe passage. The second day brings them to the edge of the Jordan Valley. The river flows below them, taking wider and swifter than expected. The sight both encourages and intimidates. Water means life, but crossing means entering truly foreign territory. On the far side lies Moab, with its different customs and strange gods. They make camp with other traveling families, sharing the evening meal and stories of what they hope to find across the river. An older man claims to have relatives in Moab who sent word of good harvests and available work. A woman speaks of friends who crossed months ago and found welcome among the Moabites. But darker stories circulate as well. Tales of families who crossed and were never heard from again. Reports of sickness in the foreign land, diseases that strike those not accustomed to the different climate, warnings about Moabite suspicion of Hebrew refugees who might bring their troubles along with their hopes. The night passes slowly. Strange sounds carry across the water, animal calls they do not recognize, voices speaking in languages they cannot understand. The boys sleep fitfully, their dreams filled with images of foreign faces and unfamiliar places. Dawn reveals the true challenge ahead. The Jordan runs deep and swift, swollen by mountain snowmelt. No bridges span its width. No ferries wait to carry travelers across. They must wade through current that could easily sweep away anyone who stumbles or loses courage. Elimelech studies the water, looking for the shallowest crossing point. Other families gather along the bank, facing the same challenge. Some have ropes and walking sticks. Others carry only their possessions and their determination to reach the other side. The crossing begins at mid-morning when the sun has warmed the air slightly. Elimelech goes first, testing each step carefully, finding places where rocks provide solid footing. The water rises to his waist, then his chest, the current tugging at his legs with surprising strength. Naomi follows, her hand gripping a rope tied to her husband's belt. The cold water takes her breath away, but she forces herself to keep moving. Behind her, the boys help each other, their faces pale with fear and excitement. Halfway across, young Chilion stumbles. The current catches him, pulling him downstream. Elimelech lunges forward, grabbing his son's hand just as the boy's head goes under. For a moment, the entire family hangs suspended in the swift water, their future balanced on the edge of disaster. But they hold together. Elimelech's strong arms pull his son to safety. Naomi's steady voice encourages them forward. The boys find their courage again, pushing through the deep water toward the eastern bank. They emerge dripping and exhausted but alive. The far shore of the Jordan feels different under their feet. The soil slightly redder, the grass a different shade of green. They have crossed more than a river. They have entered a new world, leaving behind not just their homeland, but their identity as comfortable residents of familiar places. The climb up from the Jordan Valley tests their strength again. The path winds steeply upward, and their wet clothes make every step more difficult. But gradually, the landscape opens before them, revealing the rolling hills of Moab stretching eastward toward the horizon. Their first glimpse of Moabite territory surprises them. Instead of the barren wasteland they half expected, they see green fields and grazing flocks. Smoke rises from distant villages. The sight of abundance after so much privation brings tears to Naomi's eyes. Yet, the strangeness of their new surroundings also strikes them. The architecture looks different. Houses built with unfamiliar techniques using local stone that reflects light in new ways. The people they glimpse in the distance wear clothes cut in foreign styles, their hair arranged according to customs that seem exotic and slightly unsettling. As evening approaches, they must decide where to spend their first night in Moab. Camping alone in unfamiliar territory feels dangerous, but approaching strangers for hospitality requires courage they are not sure they possess. The boys look to their parents for guidance, but even Elimelech and Naomi seem uncertain about their next move. The decision comes when they encounter other Hebrew families who have made the same journey. A small group has established a temporary camp near a spring, sharing resources and providing safety in numbers. The sight of familiar faces and the sound of their own language offers the first real comfort they have felt since leaving Bethlehem. They share their evening meal with strangers who have become instant friends through shared experience. Stories flow around the small fire, tales of what they left behind and hopes for what they might find ahead. The boys listen wide-eyed to accounts of Moabite cities and customs, their imaginations building pictures of the new life awaiting them. But as the fire burns low and the stars emerge in the foreign sky, a deeper truth settles over the group. They are no longer visitors who will return home after a brief adventure. They are refugees, displaced by forces beyond their control, hoping to build new lives in a land that does not yet know their names. The night sounds of Moab drift across their camp, owls calling from unfamiliar trees, water flowing over stones worn smooth by centuries of foreign seasons. Tomorrow they will continue their journey deeper into this strange land, carrying nothing but their possessions and their faith that somehow, somewhere ahead, they will find the new beginning they desperately need. Life among strangers. The town of Kir Hareseth sits on a hill overlooking the Arnon River, its walls built from the red stone that gives this land its distinctive color. Hebrew families have settled here in small clusters, creating neighborhoods that feel almost like home while remaining obviously foreign. The Moabites watch these newcomers with cautious curiosity, neither welcoming nor hostile, but carefully observant. Elimelech finds work quickly. His skills as a carpenter translate well across cultural boundaries. Wood needs shaping, Houses need repair, tools need crafting, regardless of the language spoken by those who use them. The Moabite merchants appreciate his careful workmanship and fair pricing, though they conduct business with formal politeness rather than the easy friendship he knew in Bethlehem. Language barriers create daily challenges. The Moabite tongue shares roots with Hebrew, but differs in accent and vocabulary. Simple transactions become complicated negotiations. Asking for directions requires hand gestures and patient repetition. The boys adapt quickly, their young ears catching nuances that their parents struggle to master. Naomi establishes her household in a small stone house near the Hebrew quarter. The rooms feel cramped compared to their spacious home in Bethlehem, but the walls are solid and the roof keeps out the rain. She learns to shop in the Moabite markets, discovering new foods and spices while searching for ingredients that remind her of home. The rhythm of daily life gradually develops familiarity. Morning prayers are whispered in Hebrew behind closed doors. Sabbath observances happen quietly, without the community celebration they once enjoyed. The boys attend informal schools where other Hebrew children learn to read and write, maintaining their connection to the traditions of their ancestors. But adaptation requires compromise. Elimelech accepts work that requires him to craft items for Moabite religious ceremonies. Naomi learns to prepare foods using local ingredients that change the taste of familiar recipes. The family participates in community events where Moabite customs dominate, their presence tolerated but not fully embraced. The Moabites themselves prove more complex than expected. Some show genuine kindness, bringing gifts of food during the family's first difficult weeks. Others maintain careful distance, treating the Hebrew refugees as temporary visitors who will eventually return to their own land. Still others demonstrate subtle hostility, viewing the newcomers as competition for jobs and resources. Elimelech's reputation as a skilled craftsman gradually opens doors. Moabite families commission furniture and tools, paying fair prices and recommending his work to their neighbors. The steady income provides security the family has not known since the famine began in Bethlehem. For the first time in years, they can plan beyond the next meal. The boys thrive in their new environment. Mahlon shows talent for learning the Moabite language, soon speaking with near-native fluency. Chilion makes friends among both Hebrew and Moabite children, his easy smile crossing cultural boundaries with the casual grace of childhood. They explore the countryside around Kir Hareseth, discovering swimming holes and climbing trees that become the landmarks of their new childhood. Naomi struggles more with the transition. Her social connections in Bethlehem had taken decades to develop. Here, she must start over, building relationships with women who share neither her history nor her assumptions about how life should be lived. The Moabite women are kind but formal, including her in their activities without fully accepting her as one of their own. Religious differences create particular tension. The Moabites worship Chemosh, their national god, with rituals that seem strange and sometimes disturbing to Hebrew sensibilities. Public festivals honor deities the newcomers do not recognize. Temple ceremonies follow patterns that conflict with everything they learned about proper worship in Bethlehem. Yet the family finds ways to maintain their faith while respecting their hosts. They observe Hebrew holidays privately, keeping the traditions alive without making public displays that might offend their neighbors. They teach their children about the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, while helping them understand the customs of their new home. The seasons cycle through their first year in Moab. Spring brings gentle rains that produce abundant crops. Summer offers long days of satisfying work and good income. Autumn delivers harvests that remind them why they made this difficult journey. Winter passes without the desperate hunger that drove them from Bethlehem. Gradually, the family develops a routine that feels almost normal. Elimelech's workshop becomes a gathering place for other Hebrew men, a space where they can speak their native language and share news from home. Naomi's house serves as an informal center for Hebrew women who come to borrow cooking supplies and exchange stories about their children. The boys begin to think of Kir Hareseth as home rather than exile. They know every street in the town, every path through the surrounding hills. They understand the rhythms of the local markets, the customs of their neighbors, the unwritten rules that govern daily life. Moab has become more than a place of refuge, it has become their world. But deep currents of homesickness still flow beneath the surface of their adaptation. Elimelech dreams of the hills around Bethlehem, waking with the smell of Judean cypress in his nostrils. Naomi finds herself weeping unexpectedly when she hears familiar songs or tastes foods that remind her of her mother's cooking. The boys ask questions about relatives they left behind, wondering if they will ever see their cousins again. Letters arrive occasionally from Bethlehem, carried by merchants or travelers who have crossed the Jordan. The news is mixed. Some reports suggest the famine continues, while others hint at gradual improvement. The family debates whether to return, but the risks of another journey and the uncertain conditions at home make staying in Moab seem like the wiser choice. Their Hebrew neighbors face similar dilemmas. Some families have already returned to Judah, unable to adjust to life in foreign territory. Others speak of making permanent homes in Moab, of giving up hope of ever returning to their ancestral lands. The refugee community divides between those who see their exile as temporary and those who accept it as permanent. Elimelech increasingly leans towards staying. His business has grown beyond his expectations. Local Moabites seek his craftsmanship, and he has trained several young men in advanced techniques. The work satisfies him, and the income provides security his family never enjoyed in Bethlehem. Why return to uncertainty when they have found stability? Naomi remains more ambivalent. She has developed friendships with Moabite women, but these relationships lack the depth of connections she left behind. She participates in community activities, but feels like an observer rather than a full participant. The pull of home remains strong, even though home may no longer exist as she remembers it. The boys adapt with the flexibility of youth. They are equally comfortable speaking Hebrew or Moabite, equally at ease with Hebrew traditions or Moabite customs. Their identity stretches across two cultures, belonging fully to neither but finding value in both. They represent the future of the Hebrew refugees, a generation that will be shaped by exile and adaptation. As their second year in Moab begins, the family has established a life that works. They have housing, income, relationships, and routines that provide structure and meaning. They have survived the trauma of displacement and created something new from the fragments of what they lost. Whether this new life will last or whether circumstances will force another change remains to be seen. The Moabite wives. The seasons turn, and with them comes the natural rhythm of young hearts finding their match. Mahlon, now grown into a man with calloused hands and gentle eyes, notices Ruth among the women at the well. She moves with quiet grace, her dark hair catching sunlight as she draws water for her family. Their first conversation happens by accident. A dropped water jar, a helping hand, eyes meeting across cultural boundaries. Ruth belongs to a respected Moabite family. Her father owns fertile land along the Arnon River, and her mother is known throughout Kir Hareseth for her skill in weaving fine cloth. Yet Ruth herself seems different from other Moabite women. She listens carefully when Hebrew refugees speak of their homeland, asking thoughtful questions about their customs and beliefs. The attraction between Mahlon and Ruth develops slowly, like sunrise gradually brightening the eastern hills. They encounter each other at the market, where Ruth sells her mother's woven goods, while Mahlon delivers furniture crafted in his father's workshop. Their conversations grow longer, moving beyond simple transactions to genuine interest in each other's thoughts and dreams. Meanwhile, Chilion finds himself drawn to Orpah, a young woman whose laughter rings like temple bells across the courtyard where the women gather to grind grain. Orpah comes from a family of modest means but good reputation. Her father raises sheep in the hills southeast of town, and her mother is known for her kindness to travelers and strangers. The Hebrew community watches these developing relationships with mixed feelings. Some elders worry about young men marrying outside their faith, concerned that Moabite wives might pull their husbands away from the traditions of their fathers. Others recognize the practical wisdom of such unions, seeing them as bridges between two communities that must learn to coexist. Elimelech and Naomi face the dilemma that confronts all parents when their children reach marriageable age. They want their sons to be happy, but they also want them to remain faithful to their heritage. The young women are clearly virtuous and kind, but they worship different gods and follow different customs. The decision weighs heavily on hearts already burdened by the complexities of life in exile. The courtship customs of Moab differ from those practiced in Bethlehem. Moabite families expect longer engagement periods with formal negotiations between parents and careful attention to financial arrangements. The process feels foreign to Hebrew sensibilities, yet it also demonstrates the seriousness with which the Moabites approach marriage. Ruth's family initially shows reluctance about their daughter marrying a Hebrew refugee. They worry about the social complications such a union might create. Hebrew men have no permanent status in Moab, no ancestral lands to inherit, no extended family networks to provide support. What future can such a marriage offer their daughter? But Ruth herself demonstrates remarkable maturity in her approach to these concerns. She speaks with her parents about her feelings for Mahlon, explaining that she has observed his character through many months of casual interaction. She has seen his kindness to elderly customers, his respect for his parents, his gentle treatment of children. These qualities matter more to her than questions of nationality or religion. Orpah faces similar family discussions about her interest in Chilion. Her parents express concern about the temporary nature of Hebrew settlement in Moab. What happens if the famine ends in Bethlehem and the refugees return to their homeland? Would their daughter be expected to leave everything familiar and follow her husband to a foreign country? The young couples navigate these family concerns with patience and wisdom beyond their years. They understand that their marriages will create new connections between two communities that have lived alongside each other without truly integrating. They accept the responsibility that comes with such pioneer relationships. Elimelech's own feelings about the proposed marriages evolve gradually. Initially, he shares the concerns of other Hebrew fathers about maintaining religious and cultural traditions. But as he observes Ruth and Orpah, he begins to see qualities that remind him of the virtuous women described in the wisdom literature of his people. Their kindness, their work ethic, their respect for elders, these traits transcend cultural boundaries. Naomi finds herself drawn to both young women, seeing in them potential daughters who might fill some of the emptiness she has felt since leaving her extended family in Bethlehem. Ruth's quiet strength reminds her of her own mother, while Orpah's cheerful disposition brings light to their household in ways that lift everyone's spirits. The formal engagement negotiations begin in early spring when the first rains bring new life to the hills around Kir Hareseth. Both families gather to discuss the practical arrangements that will bind their children together. The conversations happen in a mixture of Hebrew and Moabite, with frequent pauses for translation and clarification. The wedding preparations extend through the summer months. Moabite customs require elaborate celebrations that last for 7 days, with feasts, music, and dancing that involve the entire community. The Hebrew families must learn new traditions while finding ways to incorporate their own meaningful rituals into the festivities. Ruth and Orpah spend their engagement period learning Hebrew customs from Naomi, who becomes their guide into the mysteries of their future husband's heritage. They learn to prepare traditional foods, to observe Hebrew holidays, to understand the stories that have shaped their beloved's identity. The process creates bonds between the women that grow stronger with each passing day. The double wedding takes place during the autumn harvest season when the abundance of the land provides ample food for celebration. The entire community of Kir Hareseth participates, with Moabites and Hebrews mingling in ways that seemed impossible when the refugees first arrived. The joy of the occasion creates bridges between cultures that had maintained careful distance. Mahlon and Ruth exchange vows in a ceremony that blends Hebrew and Moabite traditions. They promise to honor each other's backgrounds while building something new together. The sight of their joined hands symbolizes more than personal commitment. It represents the possibility of two peoples finding common ground despite their differences. Chilion and Orpah follow with their own vows, their happiness evident in the way they look at each other throughout the ceremony. The younger couple seems less burdened by the cultural complexities that their relationship represents, approaching their future with the optimism of youth and the confidence of true love. The wedding feast stretches long into the night, with traditional songs from both cultures echoing across the courtyard. Hebrew psalms alternate with Moabite folk songs, creating a musical tapestry that reflects the new reality these marriages have created. The children of both communities play together, their laughter suggesting the possibilities that lie ahead. As the celebrations wind down, Elimelech and Naomi reflect on the changes that have transformed their family. 2 years ago, they arrived in Moab as desperate refugees, carrying nothing but their possessions and their hopes. Now they are connected to this land through marriage, with daughters in law who bring not just personal joy, but cultural bridges that may prove invaluable in the years ahead. The newlyweds establish their own households, but they remain close to both sets of parents. Ruth and Mahlon settle in a small house near Elimelech's workshop, where Ruth helps with the business while maintaining her own activities in the Moabite community. Orpah and Chilion choose a dwelling closer to the Hebrew quarter, where Orpah quickly becomes a favorite among the refugee women. The marriages bring a settling quality to the Hebrew community in Kir Hareseth. The next generation has put down roots that cannot be easily uprooted. The question of whether to return to Bethlehem becomes more complex when it involves not just personal preference, but the welfare of Moabite spouses who have committed their lives to Hebrew husbands. For the first time since their arrival in Moab, the future feels stable rather than uncertain. The family has work, homes, relationships, and now marriages that bind them to their new homeland. The quiet happiness that settles over their lives feels like a gift after so much upheaval and uncertainty. 3 graves in Moab. The illness arrives like a whisper, so quiet that no one notices until it has already settled deep into the bones. Elimelech wakes one morning with a cough that will not clear, a weariness that sleep cannot cure. He works through the discomfort for weeks, his skilled hands still shaping wood with their usual precision, but his strength slowly ebbs like water from a cracked jar. Naomi prepares healing broths and herbal teas, remedies learned from her mother and grandmother. The Moabite women offer their own traditional cures, roots and leaves that grow in the hills around Kir Hareseth. But the sickness that has taken hold of Elimelech seems to resist every treatment, growing stronger while he grows weaker. The Hebrew community rallies around the family. Men take turns helping in Elimelech's workshop, ensuring that his customers receive their orders on time. Women bring food and offer to help with household tasks. The support feels comforting, but everyone recognizes the signs of a man whose life is slowly slipping away. Ruth proves herself during this crisis. She spends long hours caring for her father-in-law, bringing him water and adjusting his bedding with gentle hands. Her presence brings peace to the suffering man, and her quiet competence allows Naomi to rest when exhaustion threatens to overwhelm her. The younger woman's devotion deepens the bonds between the two families. Orpah contributes her own form of care, managing the household duties that keep daily life functioning while the family focuses on nursing their patriarch. She cooks meals, tends the garden, and maintains the home with efficiency that surprises even her own family. Her cheerful disposition provides emotional support during the dark days of watching and waiting. Mahlon and Chilion struggle with seeing their father's decline. They remember him as a strong man who could carry heavy loads and work long days without complaint. Now he can barely walk across the room without assistance. The transformation feels impossible to accept, yet it continues relentlessly despite their prayers and efforts. The end comes quietly on a cool morning in late autumn. Elimelech simply stops breathing while Naomi holds his hand. No dramatic final words, no sudden crisis, just the peaceful transition from life to whatever lies beyond. The family gathers around his bed, their grief mingling with relief that his suffering has ended. The funeral follows Moabite custom since Hebrew burial practices cannot be fully observed in foreign soil. The entire community of Kir Hareseth attends, both Hebrew refugees and Moabite families who had come to respect the skilled craftsman. The grave is dug in the local cemetery, where Elimelech's Hebrew name is carved in stone, surrounded by Moabite inscriptions. Naomi's grief runs deeper than tears. She has lost not just her husband, but her anchor in a foreign land. Elimelech's presence had made their exile bearable, his steady leadership providing direction when everything else felt uncertain. Now she must navigate the complexities of life in Moab without his guidance and support. The family adjusts to their new reality over the following months. Mahlon takes over his father's workshop, his skills adequate, though not yet matching his father's master craftsmanship. Chilion helps with the business while maintaining his own work in the fields. The young wives provide emotional support that helps hold the family together during the difficult transition. But the illness that claimed Elimelech seems to linger in the air around their homes. The same cough that weakened him begins to affect Mahlon. The same weariness that drained his strength starts to touch his elder son. The pattern feels cruelly familiar, and fear settles over the family like a cold shadow. Mahlon's decline follows a similar course to his father's, though it progresses more quickly. The young man fights the sickness with the strength of youth, but the disease proves relentless. Ruth nurses her husband with the same devotion she showed to Elimelech, but her efforts cannot halt the progression of an illness that seems to have no cure. The Hebrew community watches in horror as the pattern repeats. The same symptoms, the same gradual weakening, the same inevitable outcome. Some whisper about curses, others speak of disease carried by the wind from the desert. All recognize that they face something beyond their understanding or control. Chilion falls ill before his brother recovers. The younger son's sickness moves even faster, as if the illness has learned to work more efficiently with each victim. Orpah provides the same loving care that Ruth gives to Mahlon, but both women watch helplessly as their husbands fade before their eyes. The winter months pass in a blur of nursing and prayer, of hope and despair taking turns like guards at a prison gate. The two young men lie in their beds, their wives maintaining constant vigil, their mother moving between households with the hollow eyes of someone who has already endured too much loss. Mahlon passes first, on a cold morning when frost covers the ground around Kir Hareseth. His final words are whispered to Ruth, expressions of love and gratitude that she will carry in her heart long after his voice has been silenced. The funeral follows so soon after his father's that the gravedigger barely has time to clean his tools. Chilion follows his brother within the week, as if he could not bear to be separated from his closest companion. Orpah holds his hand as he breathes his last, her tears falling on his face while she whispers prayers in both Hebrew and Moabite. The double tragedy overwhelms the community, which struggles to comprehend such concentrated sorrow. The second funeral feels like a nightmare repetition of the first. The same prayers, the same songs, the same slow walk to the cemetery where now 3 Hebrew graves mark the foreign soil. The community gathers again, but the joy that once characterized their fellowship has been replaced by shocked silence and fearful whispers. Naomi stands between the graves of her husband and sons, her world reduced to 3 mounds of earth in a foreign cemetery. The woman who once managed a prosperous household in Bethlehem now owns nothing but her grief and the clothes on her back. The magnitude of her loss defies comprehension or comfort. Ruth and Orpah stand beside their mother-in-law, their own grief complicated by questions about their future. They are young widows in a society that offers few options for women without husbands. Their marriages, which had seemed like bridges between cultures, now feel like foundations for houses that no longer exist. The Hebrew community offers support, but their own resources are limited. The refugee families have little to spare for widows who are not their own blood relatives. The Moabite community shows kindness, but Ruth and Orpah's marriages to Hebrew men have created ambiguous social positions that complicate their reintegration into their birth families. 3 graves in Moab mark the end of one story and the beginning of another. The family that arrived as refugees seeking temporary shelter has been broken by forces beyond their control. The women who remain must now decide whether to try to rebuild their lives in foreign soil or to seek their future elsewhere. The question that hangs over the 3 widows is not just where they will live, but who they will become. The deaths have changed them in ways that cannot be undone. They are no longer the same people who celebrated weddings and planned futures filled with hope. They are survivors of a tragedy that has left them stronger in some ways, but more vulnerable in others. Winter settles over Kir Hareseth with unusual severity, as if the land itself mourns the loss of 3 good men. The snow covers the graves, creating a blanket of white that makes the cemetery look peaceful rather than sorrowful. But beneath the surface, the questions remain about what comes next for the women who must now face the future alone. Naomi's decision to return. The letter arrives on a spring morning when the first wildflowers bloom in the hills around Kir Hareseth. A traveling merchant brings news from Bethlehem, his weathered face brightening as he describes the changes that have transformed the homeland Naomi left behind. The famine has ended. The rains have returned. The fields once again wave with grain, and the markets bustle with plenty. Naomi holds the letter with trembling hands, reading words that seem to come from another world. Her sister writes of abundant harvests, of Hebrew families returning from exile, of life resuming its normal patterns after years of desperate hardship. The house of bread has become the house of bread again, living up to its name for the first time in nearly a decade. The news awakens longings that Naomi has tried to bury beneath the necessities of survival in Moab. She closes her eyes and sees the familiar hills of Judah, remembers the taste of water from wells her grandfather dug, feels the particular quality of light that bathes the fields around Bethlehem at sunset. Home calls to her with a voice that grows stronger with each passing day. But the decision to return carries weight beyond personal longing. 3 graves anchor her to Moabite soil. Her husband and sons rest in foreign ground, their bones mixed with the red earth of this alien land. Leaving feels like abandonment, like betraying the memory of those she loved most. Yet staying means accepting exile as permanent, giving up hope of ever seeing home again. Ruth and Orpah watch their mother-in-law struggle with the choice that will shape all their futures. They see the way she stares eastward toward the Jordan River, the way she speaks of Bethlehem with a voice that grows soft with remembering. They understand that her heart has already begun the journey home, even while her feet remain planted in Moab. The practical considerations weigh heavily on all 3 women. Naomi owns nothing of value in Moab beyond the small household goods that fill her modest dwelling. Her husband's workshop has been sold to pay debts accumulated during his final illness. Her sons' houses belong to their widows. But what future do those properties offer to young women with no children to secure their position in Moabite society? Ruth's family welcomes her back warmly, offering to arrange a new marriage to a suitable Moabite man. They speak of her youth and beauty, her proven ability to manage a household, her desirability as a wife, despite the sadness of her widowhood. The path forward in Moab seems clear and secure, built on familiar foundations of family and culture. Orpah faces similar encouragement from her relatives. Her father speaks of young men who have inquired about her availability, decent prospects who would provide comfortable homes, and the possibility of children to fill the emptiness left by her husband's death. The future they paint glows with the warm colors of belonging and acceptance. Yet both young women find themselves reluctant to embrace these opportunities. Their marriages to Hebrew men have changed them in ways that extend beyond the mere facts of their widowhood. They have learned different songs, tasted different foods, observed different festivals. They have seen the world through Hebrew eyes, understanding perspectives that cannot be easily forgotten or set aside. Naomi watches her daughters-in-law struggle with these complications, recognizing that her own decisions will profoundly affect their choices. If she returns to Bethlehem alone, she releases them to rebuild their lives in familiar surroundings. If she asks them to accompany her, she requires them to accept the same exile that has shaped her own experience for the past decade. The Hebrew community in Kir Hareseth offers mixed counsel. Some urge Naomi to remain, pointing out the dangers of traveling alone and the uncertainties that await a widow returning to a homeland that has changed during her absence. Others encourage her departure, suggesting that she will find greater comfort among her own people than she can ever achieve in foreign territory. The decision crystallizes slowly, like ice forming on still water during the first cold nights of winter. Naomi begins to speak more often of Bethlehem, sharing memories with her daughters-in-law and describing the places they might see if they were to visit her homeland. The conversations feel hypothetical at first, but gradually they take on the weight of actual planning. She sells her household goods piece by piece, keeping only what she can carry on the long journey ahead. The process feels like dismantling the life she has built in Moab, reducing 10 years of accumulated possessions to a small bundle that will fit on her back. Each transaction reminds her of how little she has gained during her time in exile. The Hebrew families prepare to say farewell to a woman who has become a pillar of their refugee community. Naomi's wisdom and steady presence have provided guidance during countless crises. Her departure will leave a gap that cannot easily be filled, especially among the women who have relied on her experience and counsel. Ruth and Orpah make their own quiet preparations, though they have not yet announced their intentions publicly. They speak with their families about the possibility of accompanying Naomi, testing reactions and exploring options. The conversations prove difficult, filled with tears and arguments that reveal the depth of emotion surrounding their potential departure. The Moabite community watches these developments with mixed feelings. They have grown fond of the Hebrew widow who has lived among them with dignity and grace. Her departure will remove a bridge between their culture and the refugee community, potentially making future cooperation more difficult. Yet they understand the pull of homeland and the deep longing that calls people back to familiar soil. Spring advances towards summer, and Naomi's preparations become more definite. She sets a date for departure, choosing a time when the roads will be safe for travel and the weather favorable for the long journey ahead. The decision feels both liberating and terrifying, like stepping off a cliff while trusting that somehow she will learn to fly. The final weeks in Kir Hareseth pass quickly, filled with farewell visits and last-minute arrangements. Naomi receives gifts from neighbors who want her to carry something beautiful from Moab back to her homeland. The Hebrew women give her letters to deliver to relatives who might have returned to Bethlehem, connecting scattered families through her homeward journey. Her emotions during this period swing between excitement and terror. The prospect of seeing Bethlehem again fills her with joy that feels almost too intense to contain. But the fear of returning as a poor widow rather than the prosperous wife who departed haunts her quiet moments. She worries about finding housing, securing income, rebuilding relationships with people who may have forgotten her during the long years of absence. The graves of her husband and sons receive final visits, moments of quiet communion that feel like asking permission to leave. Naomi speaks to the silent stones, explaining her decision and promising that distance will not diminish her love or memory. The conversations help her find peace with the choice that once seemed impossible to make. Ruth and Orpah continue their own preparations, making decisions that will reshape their identities as completely as their marriages once did. They understand that following Naomi means embracing uncertainty, leaving behind everything familiar for the sake of loyalty that transcends cultural boundaries. The choice requires courage that surprises even them. The night before departure arrives with startling suddenness. Naomi lies in her empty house, surrounded by the echoes of 10 years spent in foreign territory. Tomorrow she will begin the journey home, carrying nothing but her possessions and her hopes. The woman who will cross the Jordan westward bears little resemblance to the desperate refugee who crossed eastward so long ago. The road of separation. The dawn breaks gray and cool as three women gather at the edge of Kir Hareseth, their small bundles containing everything they now own in the world. Naomi looks older than her years, her face marked by grief but set with determination. Ruth and Orpah stand beside her, their youth making their decision to abandon everything familiar seem both courageous and foolish. The road stretches westward toward the Jordan River, the same path Naomi traveled 10 years ago when desperation drove her family from Bethlehem. But this journey carries different weight. Then she fled toward uncertain refuge. Now she travels toward home, though what she will find there remains as mysterious as what she left behind. Other Hebrew families have made similar decisions in recent months. The road shows signs of increased traffic. Wheel ruts from carts carrying possessions, remains of cooking fires where travelers rested for the night, worn paths branching off toward water sources. The Great Return has begun, reversing the exodus that scattered Hebrew refugees across foreign territories. The first hours of walking pass in relative silence. Each woman remains lost in her own thoughts, processing the magnitude of the choice that brought them to this dusty road. Naomi thinks of the sister who wrote to her, wondering if the reunion will feel joyful or awkward after so many years of separation. Ruth and Orpah contemplate futures that seem as uncertain as morning mist. The familiar countryside of Moab unfolds around them one final time. Rolling hills covered with spring grass, streams running clear and cold from mountain sources, groves of trees that provide shade for shepherds and their flocks. The land has been good to them despite their foreign status. It offered refuge when they needed shelter, work when they needed income, acceptance when they needed community. But with each step westward, the landscape begins to feel more foreign rather than more familiar. They are walking away from the only life Ruth and Orpah have ever known, away from family and friends and the graves of their husbands. The young women's faces show the strain of this realization, their earlier determination wavering under the weight of what they are abandoning. The road descends gradually toward the Jordan Valley, and the air grows warmer as they lose elevation. By midday, the sun beats down with intensity that forces them to seek shade beside a small stream. They rest in the shadow of an overhanging rock, sharing bread and water while contemplating the path that lies ahead. It is here, in this quiet place between one world and another, that Naomi's resolve finally breaks. She looks at her daughters-in-law, young women who have given up everything to accompany a bitter old widow on a journey toward uncertainty, and realizes the selfishness of allowing them to continue. They deserve better futures than following her into an exile that will make them foreigners in a new land. She speaks slowly, her voice carrying the weight of love and sacrifice. Ruth and Orpah should return to their families, she tells them. They should rebuild their lives in familiar surroundings, remarry suitable men, bear children who will carry on their family names. What future can she offer them in Bethlehem? What security can a poor widow provide to young women who deserve prosperity and happiness? The words hang in the air like heat shimmer, distorting the clear intentions that brought them this far. Ruth and Orpah look at each other, then at Naomi, struggling to understand why their mother-in-law would send them away after allowing them to come so far. The logic of her argument makes sense, but the emotional reality of separation feels almost unbearable. Naomi continues her gentle persuasion, painting pictures of the lives they could build in Moab. Orpah's father has already identified several suitable marriage prospects. Ruth's family speaks of a cousin who has shown interest in her since her husband's death. Both young women could return to comfort and security, leaving behind the uncertainty that travel with Naomi represents. But practical arguments cannot easily overcome emotional bonds forged through shared grief and mutual support. Ruth and Orpah have become more than daughters-in-law to Naomi. They are the daughters she never had, companions who understood her sorrow and helped her carry burdens too heavy for one person to bear alone. The thought of separating feels like another death in a family that has already suffered too much loss. The conversation stretches through the afternoon heat, with Naomi arguing for their return, and both young women insisting on continuing the journey. They speak of loyalty and love, of commitments that transcend practical considerations. They remind her of the care she showed them during their husbands' illnesses, the wisdom she shared during their adjustment to Hebrew customs, the maternal affection that filled some of the emptiness in their widowed hearts. Yet Naomi's arguments gradually take effect, especially with Orpah. The younger woman begins to consider the truth of what her mother-in-law says. She is still young enough to start over, still attractive enough to find a good husband, still connected enough to her birth family to resume her place in Moabite society. The future Naomi describes grows more appealing as the uncertainties of life in Bethlehem become more apparent. The decision happens gradually, like erosion wearing away at rock, until suddenly a cliff collapses into the sea. Orpah's resolve weakens first, then crumbles entirely as she realizes the wisdom of Naomi's counsel. She can return to her father's house, accept one of the marriage proposals that await her, build a new life on familiar foundations rather than foreign ground. The moment of separation arrives with unexpected suddenness. Orpah rises from their resting place, her face streaked with tears but set with determination. She embraces Naomi with fierce intensity, whispering words of gratitude and love that will echo in memory long after this moment passes. She thanks her mother-in-law for the lessons learned, the kindness received, the love shared during their brief time as family. The farewell between Orpah and Ruth proves even more difficult. They have been sisters through marriage, companions through grief, friends through the long process of adjustment to Hebrew customs and family. Now they must separate, each choosing a different path toward an uncertain future. Their embrace lasts long minutes, both knowing that they may never see each other again. Orpah walks away without looking back, her figure growing smaller as she retraces the path toward Kir Hareseth. Her departure changes the dynamics of the remaining journey, leaving Ruth as Naomi's only companion on the road toward Bethlehem. The young woman's choice to continue becomes more significant now that she truly understands the cost of her decision. Naomi turns her persuasive powers toward her remaining daughter-in-law, using Orpah's departure as an example of wisdom and practical thinking. Ruth should follow her sister-in-law's example, she argues. She should return to her family, her culture, her gods. She should not sacrifice her youth and beauty on the altar of loyalty to an old woman who has nothing to offer but hardship and uncertainty. But Ruth's response will prove to be one of the most beautiful speeches in all of human literature. Words that transform a dusty rest stop beside a Moabite stream into holy ground where heaven touches earth through human love and divine providence. The conversation that follows will define not just their immediate future, but the eternal legacy of their relationship. The sun begins its descent toward the western hills as the two women face each other beside the stream. One represents age and experience, shaped by loss and hardened by disappointment. The other embodies youth and hope, willing to embrace uncertainty for the sake of love that transcends cultural boundaries. The choice that Ruth makes in this moment will echo through generations, becoming a model of loyalty that inspires countless others to choose love over security, commitment over convenience. Ruth's pledge. The words rise from Ruth's heart like water from a deep spring, flowing with a power that transforms the ordinary moment into something eternal. She stands before Naomi, her young face illuminated by determination that seems to come from beyond herself, and speaks the pledge that will resonate through countless generations of human hearts, seeking to understand the true meaning of loyalty. Do not ask me to leave you or to turn back from following you. Her voice carries quiet strength, each word measured and deliberate. The Moabite accent that once marked her as foreign has softened through years of speaking Hebrew, but now her words transcend language entirely, expressing truths that belong to every culture and every age. Naomi listens with growing amazement as this young woman, who owes her nothing beyond the basic courtesies due to a deceased husband's mother, voluntarily binds herself to a future that promises only hardship and uncertainty. The older woman has spent the afternoon painting realistic pictures of poverty and isolation awaiting them in Bethlehem. Yet Ruth responds by embracing those very difficulties as the price she willingly pays for love. Where you go, I will go. Where you stay, I will stay. The promise flows like poetry, but it carries the weight of legal commitment. Ruth is not speaking in romantic abstractions, but making concrete pledges about the practical details of daily life. She will share Naomi's homelessness, her poverty, her uncertain status in a community that may not welcome returning refugees. The Jordan River flows somewhere ahead of them, marking the boundary between Moab and the Promised Land. Ruth could easily cross back eastward, returning to her family and the comfortable future they have planned for her. Instead, she chooses to cross westward into territory where she will forever be marked as a foreigner, a Moabite woman whose accent and customs will always set her apart from those around her. Your people will be my people, and your God my God. These words represent the deepest level of Ruth's commitment, reaching beyond practical arrangements to embrace spiritual transformation. She renounces not just her homeland, but her heritage, choosing to worship the God of Israel rather than Chemosh and the other deities of her birth culture. The religious implications of Ruth's pledge extend far beyond personal preference. Moabite worship involves rituals and beliefs that conflict fundamentally with Hebrew monotheism. By choosing Naomi's God, Ruth accepts exclusion from the religious community that has shaped her identity since childhood. She will never again participate in the festivals and ceremonies that mark the rhythm of Moabite spiritual life. Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. The finality of this commitment takes even Naomi's breath away. Ruth is not promising temporary support until circumstances improve. She is pledging her entire future, including her death and burial, to the path that Naomi has chosen. She will rest in Hebrew soil beside her mother-in-law when their earthly journey ends. The young woman seals her pledge with an oath that invokes divine judgment on herself if she fails to keep her promises. May the Lord deal with me, be it ever so severely, if even death separates you and me. She calls upon Naomi's God to punish her if she wavers in her commitment, binding herself with religious vows that cannot be easily broken or forgotten. Naomi stands speechless before this outpouring of devotion. She has argued practical wisdom, painted realistic pictures of hardship ahead, urged Ruth to choose security over sentiment. Yet her daughter-in-law responds with a love that transcends all practical considerations, choosing relationship over comfort, loyalty over logic, commitment over convenience. The moment transforms both women. Ruth discovers within herself a capacity for love that surprises even her own understanding. She had not planned to make such a speech when she began the journey. The words emerge from depths of feeling she did not know she possessed, revealing character that has been shaped by suffering into something beautiful and strong. Naomi realizes that she has received a gift beyond her deserving. This young foreign woman has chosen to bind her future to that of a bitter old widow who has nothing to offer but uncertainty and hardship. The love Ruth expresses seems to echo divine love itself, showing grace that cannot be earned or explained, but only received with gratitude and wonder. The theological implications of Ruth's choice extend beyond the immediate moment. Her decision to worship the God of Israel demonstrates that divine love reaches across ethnic and cultural boundaries, welcoming those who approach with sincere hearts, regardless of their origins. Her inclusion in the Hebrew community suggests that God's covenant extends beyond biological descent to embrace all who choose faith over familiarity. The literary beauty of Ruth's speech has inspired countless generations of readers, but its power flows from the depth of commitment it represents rather than mere eloquence. These are not empty words spoken in emotional excitement, but carefully considered pledges that will guide every decision Ruth makes for the rest of her life. The practical consequences of Ruth's choice become apparent immediately. She has burned the bridges that could have carried her back to comfortable life in Moab. Her family will mourn her departure as if she had died, since they may never see her again. The marriage prospects that awaited her in Kir Hareseth are now lost forever, leaving her future dependent entirely on whatever opportunities might arise in Bethlehem. Yet Ruth seems to find peace rather than anxiety in this complete surrender of control over her destiny. By choosing to follow Naomi regardless of consequences, she discovers the strange freedom that comes from total commitment. She no longer needs to calculate advantages or weigh alternatives. Her path has been chosen, and she can walk forward without looking back. Naomi's response to Ruth's pledge reveals the transformation that love can work even in hearts hardened by grief and disappointment. The bitter woman who urged both daughters-in-law to return home finds herself overwhelmed by gratitude for the unexpected gift of Ruth's devotion. The cold practicality that shaped her arguments melts before the warmth of love that asks nothing for itself. The two women resume their journey westward with new understanding of their relationship. They are no longer widow and daughter-in-law, connected only by marriage to men who have died. They have become companions by choice, bound together by vows that transcend legal or social obligation. Ruth's pledge has created new family ties based on love rather than blood or law. The road ahead seems less daunting now that they travel it together by deliberate choice rather than mere circumstance. Ruth's commitment gives Naomi strength to face the uncertainties awaiting them in Bethlehem. Naomi's acceptance gives Ruth confidence that her sacrifice serves a worthy purpose. Together, they can face whatever challenges arise from their decision to build a future on the foundation of mutual loyalty. The afternoon sun casts long shadows as they continue toward the Jordan River, but the approaching darkness feels less threatening now. Ruth has chosen her path with full knowledge of its difficulties. Naomi has accepted companionship she did not expect to receive. They walk forward together into an uncertain future, but they walk with the assurance that whatever comes, they will face it side by side. The echo of Ruth's words seems to travel with them, transforming the dusty road into sacred space where human love reflects divine grace. Her pledge will be remembered and repeated as long as people struggle to understand the meaning of loyalty, the power of commitment, and the beauty of love that chooses sacrifice over self-interest. Entering Bethlehem. The walls of Bethlehem rise from the Judean hills like a promise kept a long delay. Naomi sees them first, her eyes detecting familiar outlines that have haunted her dreams through 10 years of exile. The sight stops her in the middle of the dusty road, her hand reaching out to steady herself against Ruth's shoulder as memories flood back with overwhelming force. The town looks smaller than she remembered, its limestone walls weathered by the same rains that have ended the famine and restored life to the surrounding countryside. But the essential character remains unchanged. Houses climbing the hillside in terraced layers, narrow streets winding between ancient buildings, the central well where women have gathered for generations to draw water and share news. Ruth studies her new home with eyes that see everything as foreign and wonderful. The architecture differs from Moabite building styles, with flat roofs designed to catch precious rainwater and walls built to withstand the hot, dry summers of the hill country. The people moving through the streets wear clothes cut in unfamiliar patterns, their conversations flowing in Hebrew accents she has learned to understand, but still finds distinctly foreign. The return happens during barley harvest season, when the town bustles with activity that provides perfect camouflage for two travel-worn women entering quietly through the main gate. Field workers carry bundles of grain toward threshing floors outside the walls. Merchants haggle over prices for the new crop. Children run between houses, their laughter mixing with the sounds of daily commerce. But their entrance does not go unnoticed. Bethlehem remains small enough that strangers attract attention, especially women traveling without male protection. Eyes follow them as they make their way through streets that feel both familiar and changed to Naomi, completely new and slightly intimidating to Ruth. Recognition comes slowly, like dawn breaking over distant mountains. An old woman drawing water at the central well stops her work to stare at Naomi's face, her memory reaching back through the years to match present reality with past remembrance. Others gather as whispers spread through the crowd, voices rising in amazement and uncertainty. Can this be Naomi? The question ripples through the gathering crowd, spoken in tones that range from wonder to doubt. The woman who left Bethlehem 10 years ago was the wife of a prosperous man, well-dressed and confident in her position in the community. The woman who returns is weathered by grief and hardship, her clothes marking her as poor, her face bearing lines carved by suffering. Naomi hears her name spoken with growing certainty as more people recognize features that time has changed but not erased. She straightens her shoulders, preparing to face questions she has dreaded throughout the long journey home. How will she explain the absence of her husband and sons? How will she account for the foreign woman who accompanies her? The crowd grows as news of the return spreads through the narrow streets. Women emerge from houses, their work forgotten in the excitement of seeing someone they had given up for lost. Men pause in their trading to observe the reunion, their faces showing curiosity mixed with caution. Children press forward, eager to witness events that will become stories told around family fires for years to come. Ruth remains slightly behind her mother-in-law, understanding her role as observer rather than participant in this reunion with Naomi's past. She watches the faces in the crowd, noting expressions that range from warm welcome to suspicious calculation. These people will judge her worth based on her usefulness to their community, and she has no idea what value a young Moabite widow might offer to Hebrew farmers and merchants. Naomi raises her voice to address the crowd, her words carrying across the square with clarity born of deep emotion. "Do not call me Naomi," she announces, using the Hebrew word that means pleasant or sweet. Call me Mara, she continues, choosing the name that means bitter, because the Almighty has made my life very bitter. The declaration shocks the gathering into silence. They remember Naomi as a woman blessed with a loving husband, healthy sons, and comfortable circumstances. To hear her reject her own name in favor of one that emphasizes suffering suggests depths of tragedy that humble their excitement about her return. She continues her explanation, her voice growing stronger as she speaks truths that have burned in her heart throughout the long journey home. I went away full, but the Lord has brought me back empty. Why call me Naomi when the Lord has afflicted me and the Almighty has brought misfortune upon me? The words hang in the air like incense, carrying the weight of grief that cannot be quickly healed or easily comforted. The crowd understands now that this is not a joyful homecoming, but the return of a woman broken by losses that defy their understanding. The excitement of reunion gives way to sympathetic silence as they process the magnitude of what Naomi has endured. Ruth steps forward slightly, her movement drawing attention to her presence for the first time. The crowd notices her foreign appearance, her Moabite clothing, her accent when she finally speaks a few words of greeting. Questions form in their minds about this young woman's relationship to Naomi and her reason for coming to Bethlehem. Naomi introduces Ruth simply as her daughter-in-law, the widow of her son Mahlon. She does not elaborate on Ruth's origins or explain the remarkable decision that brought a Moabite woman to live among Hebrew people. The crowd accepts the introduction with reserved politeness, uncertain how to respond to this unexpected addition to their community. The initial excitement of the return begins to fade as practical questions emerge. Where will Naomi live? How will she support herself? What place can she occupy in a community that has continued its life without her for 10 years? The answers are not immediately apparent to anyone, including Naomi herself. A few older women step forward to offer immediate hospitality, remembering friendships that predate the famine and exile. They invite Naomi to share their evening meals, offer temporary shelter until she can establish her own household, provide the basic necessities needed by women who own nothing but the clothes they wear and the small bundles they carry. Ruth watches these exchanges with careful attention, beginning to understand the social dynamics that will shape her life in Bethlehem. She sees kindness mixed with caution, generosity tempered by practical concerns about resources. These people will help Naomi because they remember her family and honor the obligations of community, but they remain uncertain about their responsibilities toward a foreign daughter-in-law. The afternoon wears on as small groups form and reform around the returned women. Stories emerge gradually, tales of the journey from Moab, explanations of the deaths that have left them widowed and alone, descriptions of their hopes for rebuilding life in Bethlehem. Each conversation adds new details to the picture that will shape community understanding of their situation. Ruth speaks little during these exchanges, content to listen and observe. She hears names mentioned that mean nothing to her, references to people and events from Naomi's past that provide context for relationships she does not yet understand. The conversations flow in Hebrew idioms that challenge her comprehension, though she grasps enough to follow the general direction of each discussion. As evening approaches, the immediate excitement of the return subsides into more mundane considerations of where the two women will sleep and what they will eat. Several families offer hospitality, but Naomi chooses to accept help from her closest relative, a woman whose husband owns fields south of town and whose house can accommodate unexpected guests. The sun sets behind the hills west of Bethlehem as Naomi and Ruth follow their hostess through streets that grow familiar to one and remain mysterious to the other. They have completed the physical journey from Moab to the Promised Land, but the emotional and social journey toward true belonging has only just begun. Ruth looks back once toward the eastern hills where Moab lies hidden beyond the horizon. Everything she has ever known remains in that direction. Family, friends, familiar customs, comfortable certainty about her place in the world. But she has chosen to walk forward into this new land, trusting that somehow, somewhere ahead, she will find the belonging that her loyalty to Naomi deserves. Gleaning among the fields, dawn breaks over Bethlehem with the clear light of early summer, revealing fields that stretch like golden carpets across the rolling hills surrounding the town. The barley harvest has begun in earnest, with workers moving through the grain in steady lines, their sickles flashing in the morning sun as they cut stalks heavy with seed. Ruth wakes in the small room she shares with Naomi in their temporary lodging, her mind already turning toward the practical problem that faces them each day: finding enough food to sustain two women who possess neither money nor property. The kindness of neighbors has provided shelter and initial meals, but charity cannot continue indefinitely without becoming burden rather than blessing. She has learned about gleaning from conversations overheard in the marketplace and around the wells where women gather to draw water. Hebrew law requires landowners to leave the edges of their fields unharvested, to allow the poor and the foreign to gather grain that would otherwise be wasted. The practice offers hope to those who have no other means of support. The law traces back to Moses himself, reflecting divine concern for society's most vulnerable members. Farmers must not harvest the corners of their fields completely. They must not return to gather grain that their workers accidentally drop. They must not strip their vineyards bare, but leave some fruit for those who have no land of their own to cultivate. Ruth understands that gleaning means hard work under the hot sun, competing with other desperate people for grain that may or may not be sufficient to meet their needs. But the alternative is slow starvation, and her young strength gives her advantages that Naomi's advanced age cannot match. Someone must venture into the fields, and logic dictates that she should be the one to go. She discusses her plan with Naomi over their meager breakfast of bread provided by their hostess. The older woman's face shows mixed emotions: gratitude for Ruth's willingness to work, concern about the dangers a young foreign woman might face working alone among strangers, worry about what their resort to gleaning says about their reduced circumstances. But necessity overrides all other considerations. They need food, and gleaning offers the only realistic possibility of obtaining it through their own efforts rather than continued dependence on charity. Naomi gives her blessing to Ruth's plan, along with practical advice about which fields might offer the best opportunities and which landowners are known for treating gleaners with fairness and respect. Ruth sets out while the morning air still carries coolness, joining the stream of poor people heading toward the grain fields that surround Bethlehem. She recognizes some faces from the town: widows, elderly men without families, mothers carrying babies while their older children walk alongside. All share the common bond of need that drives them to seek sustenance in the corners of other people's property. The sight of the harvest operations impresses her with their scale and organization. Teams of workers move through the grain fields with practiced efficiency, cutting stalks and binding them into sheaves that are loaded onto carts and carried to threshing floors, where the grain will be separated from the chaff. The abundance overwhelms her senses after months of watching Naomi carefully ration their dwindling supplies. She approaches the overseer of the nearest field, a middle-aged man whose weathered face and careful eyes suggest long experience managing agricultural operations. Her request to glean is granted with a brief nod and a gesture toward the edges of the field where other poor people are already working. No warmth marks the exchange, but no hostility either. Merely the practical acknowledgement of legal obligation. The work proves more difficult than she anticipated. The sun climbs quickly toward its zenith, turning the grain field into an oven that tests her endurance with each passing hour. Her back aches from constant bending to gather scattered stalks. Her hands grow raw from handling the rough grain. Her water supply dwindles faster than expected under the relentless heat. Yet she persists, driven by determination that surprises even herself. Each handful of grain represents food for herself and Naomi, sustenance that will allow them to maintain their independence rather than becoming permanent burdens on the charity of others. The pile of gleaned barley grows slowly but steadily as the morning progresses. Other gleaners work around her with varying degrees of success. Some seem to know which areas will yield the most grain, moving efficiently through the field with practiced eyes that spot overlooked stalks. Others appear as inexperienced as she, struggling with the physical demands and uncertain about the unwritten rules that govern their activity. The landowner arrives mid morning, riding through his fields to check on the progress of the harvest. Ruth hears workers calling out greetings, their voices carrying respect mixed with familiarity. This man is clearly well regarded by those who work for him, suggesting a character that values fairness and treats people with dignity, regardless of their position. She keeps her head down as he passes, focusing on her work while remaining acutely aware of his presence. Foreign women have no particular status in Hebrew society, and her Moabite origins make her situation even more precarious. Drawing attention to herself could result in questions she prefers not to answer or hostility she is not prepared to handle. But fate has different plans. The landowner notices her among the gleaners, his attention drawn perhaps by her youth or her foreign appearance or simply the systematic way she approaches her work. She hears him speaking with his overseer, their voices too low for her to understand the content of their conversation, but their glances in her direction suggest that she has become the subject of their discussion. The overseer approaches her during the workers' rest period, when the heat forces everyone to seek shade and refresh themselves with water and bread. His manner remains respectful but authoritative as he asks about her identity and her relationship to the Hebrew community. She explains her connection to Naomi, her recent arrival from Moab, her need to glean for their survival. The information travels back to the landowner, who observes her throughout the remainder of the morning with growing interest. She cannot interpret his attention, whether it represents suspicion, curiosity, or something else entirely. She simply continues working, grateful for the opportunity to gather grain, and hoping that her diligence will earn the right to return the following day. The sun reaches its peak as the morning's work concludes, and the field workers break for their midday meal. Ruth gathers her small pile of gleaned grain, estimating that it might provide flour for several meals if she can find someone willing to grind it for her. The amount seems pitifully small compared to the abundant harvest surrounding her, but it represents hope rather than despair. She prepares to return to town for the afternoon rest that custom demands during the hottest part of the day, when even the most dedicated workers seek shelter from the blazing sun. Her back aches from the morning's labor, and her water supply has dwindled to a few precious drops that must be saved for the journey home. But as she bends to gather her small bundle of grain, she hears footsteps approaching across the stubbled field. The landowner himself walks toward her, his presence commanding attention from all the workers who pause in their preparations to observe this unexpected interaction. Ruth's heart pounds as she straightens to face him and uncertain whether she has somehow violated the rules that govern gleaning or attracted unwelcome scrutiny. His first words surprise her with their gentleness. Rather than questioning her right to glean or challenging her presence in his fields, he speaks with kindness that seems genuine rather than merely polite. The contrast between her expectations and his actual demeanor leaves her momentarily speechless, unsure how to respond to courtesy she did not anticipate. The conversation that follows will change the trajectory of her life in ways she cannot yet imagine. But for now, she simply stands in the harvest field, a young Moabite woman facing a Hebrew landowner whose intentions remain mysterious, but whose manner suggests possibilities she had not dared to hope for. The grain in her bundle represents more than food for the day's survival. Each stalk speaks of divine providence, working through human kindness, of laws designed to protect the vulnerable being honored by those with power to help. The morning's work has yielded more than barley. It has planted the first seeds of hope that her future in Bethlehem might hold blessings she never expected to receive. The sun beats down mercilessly as the two figures face each other across the harvested field, their conversation about to unfold in ways that will echo through generations yet unborn. The wheels of destiny turn slowly but surely, guided by hands that work through human choices to weave patterns of redemption that transform ordinary moments into sacred encounters. Boaz enters the story. Dawn breaks over Bethlehem's golden fields. The barley harvest spreads like a tapestry across the rolling hills. Workers move through the grain in steady rhythm, their voices carrying soft melodies across the morning air. This is the season of plenty, when the earth gives back what winter took away. Among these fertile lands stands a man whose name carries weight in every corner of the city. Boaz walks through his fields with the confidence of one who has earned his place through wisdom and fair dealing. His shoulders are broad, his hands weathered from years of honest work, yet his wealth has not made him proud. Instead, it has taught him the gentle art of generosity. The sun climbs higher, painting the grain stalks in shades of amber and gold. Boaz pauses to speak with his workers, asking about their families, their needs. He remembers names and faces. He knows which worker has a sick child, which one struggles to feed aging parents. This is not mere politeness, but genuine care woven into the fabric of his character. His servants respect him not because they must, but because he has earned their loyalty through countless small kindnesses. When the day grows hot, he ensures water is brought to the fields. When the work is hard, he labors alongside them. When harvest time brings abundance, he shares the blessing with those who helped create it. Boaz inherited his fields from his father, but he has multiplied them through wisdom and patience. He understands the rhythm of seasons, the language of soil and sky. He knows when to plant and when to wait, when to harvest and when to let the land rest. His success flows from this deep connection to the earth and its cycles. The morning progresses, and Boaz notices something unusual among the gleaners. A young woman works with uncommon diligence, her movements graceful yet purposeful. She keeps her head down, gathering grain with quiet determination. Her clothes mark her as a stranger, but her manner speaks of dignity despite her obvious poverty. He watches her for a moment, noting how she works without complaint, how she shows respect to the other workers, how she carries herself with quiet strength. There is something about her that draws his attention, though he cannot yet name what it is. Boaz approaches his foreman, a man who has served his family for decades. Their conversation is brief but meaningful. Who is this woman? Where does she come from? The answers intrigue him more than he expected. She is Ruth, the Moabite woman who came with Naomi, the one who chose loyalty over comfort, who left everything familiar to care for her mother-in-law. Word of her devotion has already spread through Bethlehem's streets. People speak of her with a mixture of curiosity and growing respect. Standing in his fields, watching this foreign woman work under the climbing sun, Boaz feels something shift within him. He has lived long enough to recognize the stirring of divine purpose. This is not mere coincidence that brings her to his land. There is a deeper current at work, one that connects past to future in ways he cannot yet fully understand. The grain continues to fall beneath the workers' tools. The gleaners follow in their wake, gathering what remains. But Boaz's attention keeps returning to Ruth, to the quiet strength in her posture, to the dignity she maintains despite her circumstances. He has seen many gleaners over the years. Some work grudgingly, others with desperate haste. But Ruth works with something different, a steady purpose that speaks of inner strength. She understands that this work, humble as it may be, is her path to survival and dignity. As the morning unfolds, Boaz finds himself making a decision that will change the course of two lives. He will not simply watch from a distance. He will act with the kindness that has always defined his character. But this time, something deeper moves his heart. The sun rises higher, and in its light, the first threads of destiny begin to weave themselves into a pattern of love and redemption. Favor in the fields. Ruth straightens her back, wiping sweat from her brow with the back of her hand. The sun has grown warm, and her bundle of grain, though small, represents hours of careful work. She has learned the rhythm of gleaning. Follow the harvesters, gather what they leave, avoid the forbidden rows where the crop belongs entirely to the landowner. The work is honest, but humbling. Each stalk of grain must be earned through patience and persistence. Her hands have grown rough from handling the sharp-edged barley, but she does not complain. This is her provision, her way of caring for Naomi without begging for charity. A shadow falls across her path. She looks up to see a man approaching, his bearing marking him as someone of importance. Her heart quickens with worry. Has she transgressed some boundary? Has she gathered grain where she should not? But the man's face holds no anger. Instead, His eyes carry an unexpected warmth. When he speaks, his voice is gentle, carrying the authority of ownership softened by genuine kindness. "My daughter," he says, and the words surprise her. She expected formal address, perhaps even harshness. Instead, he speaks as if she belongs here, as if she has value beyond her circumstances. Boaz continues speaking, and his words wash over her like cool water on parched ground. He tells her not to glean in other fields, to stay close to his servant girls where she will be safe. He has already spoken to the young men, ensuring they will not bother her. She may drink from the water jars whenever thirst overtakes her. Ruth's mind struggles to process this unexpected kindness. She has prepared herself for tolerance at best, rejection at worst. This generosity feels almost too good to be true. Why would this wealthy landowner show such favor to a foreign widow? Her response comes from a place of deep gratitude mixed with genuine puzzlement. She falls to her knees, pressing her face to the ground in the traditional gesture of humble thanksgiving. "Why have I found such favor in your sight?" she asks. "I am only a foreigner." The question hangs in the air between them. Ruth genuinely does not understand why she deserves this kindness. In her homeland, she might have expected such treatment as a matter of course, but here in Israel, as a Moabite woman, she has no claim on anyone's generosity. Boaz's answer reveals the depth of his character. He has heard her story, not just the bare facts, but the heart behind them. He knows of her choice to leave her family and her gods to care for Naomi. He understands the magnitude of her sacrifice, the courage required to embrace an uncertain future in a foreign land. His words paint a picture of her actions that Ruth herself might not recognize. He speaks of her kindness to Naomi, of her willingness to come to a people she did not know. He sees nobility in choices that felt simply necessary to her heart. But more than recognition, Boaz offers blessing. He prays that the Lord God of Israel will reward her fully, that she will find refuge under his wings. These words carry weight beyond mere politeness. They speak of acceptance, of belonging, of a future bright with possibility. Ruth receives these words like someone who has been living in shadow suddenly stepping into sunlight. The blessing touches something deep within her, a hope she had hardly dared to nurture. Perhaps her choice to follow Naomi has led her to more than survival. Perhaps it has led her to a new beginning. When the noon meal arrives, Boaz calls Ruth to join him and his workers. This simple invitation carries profound significance. She is no longer just a gleaner working at the margins. She is a welcome guest at his table. He offers her roasted grain, the common food of harvest workers. But when she cannot finish what he has given, he does not take back the remainder. Instead, he allows her to keep it, another small kindness that speaks of his generous heart. After the meal, as Ruth returns to her gleaning, Boaz speaks quietly to his workers. His instructions are clear and purposeful. They are to let grain fall on purpose for her to find. They are to pull out stalks from the bundles they have gathered, leaving them in her path. They are to create abundance where there was only subsistence. Ruth works through the afternoon, unaware of the deliberate kindness being shown to her. She only knows that her bundle grows larger than she dared hope. When evening comes, she has gathered nearly an entire basket of grain, enough to feed herself and Naomi for several days. As she prepares to leave, Ruth's heart overflows with gratitude. This day has brought more than food. It has brought hope, dignity, and the first stirring of something she cannot yet name. The God of Israel, whom she has chosen to follow, has shown his face through the kindness of a stranger who is no longer quite so strange. The walk back to Bethlehem feels lighter than her morning journey. Her bundle is heavy with grain, but her spirit carries an even greater weight of blessing. She has found favor in the eyes of one who had no reason to show her kindness, and in that favor, she glimpses the beginning of a new story. Boaz's reputation and Ruth's diligence. Word travels swiftly through Bethlehem's winding streets. By evening, the story of Ruth's extraordinary gleaning has reached every household. The women gathering water at the well speak in hushed tones about the Moabite woman who returned home with more grain than most gleaners collect in a week. Naomi's weathered hands shake as she examines the barley Ruth has brought. This is not the meager amount she expected from a day's gleaning. This abundance speaks of deliberate kindness, of favor that goes beyond mere tolerance. Her eyes sharp despite her years, recognize the quality of the grain. This comes from good land, well-tended fields. When Ruth mentions the name Boaz, Naomi's expression changes completely. The bitterness that has clouded her features for so long gives way to something approaching wonder. She knows this name, knows the man who bears it. Her hands pause in their examination of the grain as memories flood back. Boaz is kinsman to her late husband Elimelech. Not just an acquaintance or distant relative, but family blood that carries with it ancient obligations and possibilities. The wheels of providence, it seems, have been turning even when she thought herself abandoned by heaven. She tells Ruth what she knows of this man, and the picture that emerges is one of rare character. Boaz has built his reputation not just on wealth, but on wisdom and justice. When disputes arise in the city, people seek his counsel. When the poor need assistance, they find his door open. When harvest time brings abundance, he ensures that blessing extends beyond his own household. His father before him was known for similar virtues, but Boaz has surpassed even that legacy. He has taken the foundation of integrity he inherited and built upon it a life of active compassion. His success in business flows from fair dealing. His influence in the community stems from consistent character. The young men of Bethlehem respect him as a model of what a man should be. The older generation sees in him the embodiment of their highest values. Women consider him the most eligible bachelor in the region, yet he has remained unmarried, waiting perhaps for something more than mere social advantage. Ruth listens to these descriptions with growing amazement. The man who showed her such kindness is not just wealthy, but truly good. His generosity toward her was not an aberration, but the natural expression of his character. She begins to understand that her encounter with him was more significant than she first realized. Morning comes, and Ruth prepares to return to the fields. But this time she goes not as a desperate stranger hoping for crumbs, but as someone who has found favor with a man of honor. The change in her circumstances is reflected in her bearing. She holds her head higher, walks with more confidence. Boaz notices her return with satisfaction. He has thought of her through the evening, wondering if she would come back, hoping his kindness has not frightened her away. When he sees her moving through his fields with the same quiet dignity, he feels a warmth that surprises him with its intensity. Day after day, Ruth proves her worth through consistent effort. She arrives early, when dew still clings to the grain's stalks. She works steadily through the morning heat, taking only brief rests for water. She remains until the sun begins its descent, maximizing every moment of potential gleaning. Her diligence does not go unnoticed by the other workers. They see how she treats the grain with respect, wasting nothing. They observe how she works without complaint, how she shows courtesy to everyone she encounters. Gradually, their initial suspicion gives way to admiration. Boaz watches this transformation with growing respect. He has seen many gleaners over the years, but Ruth's approach is different. She treats this humble work as if it were sacred, as if each grain she gathers carries the weight of responsibility for another's welfare. He begins to find reasons to walk through the sections of his fields where she works, not to check on her behavior, but simply to observe the quiet strength she brings to her labor. There is something about her presence that brings peace to his well-ordered world. The other workers begin to notice their master's attention to the Moabite woman. Some whisper among themselves, wondering if romance might be blooming in the barley fields. Others simply note that their employer seems more content these days, more likely to smile as he moves through his domain. Ruth remains focused on her work, but she too becomes aware of Boaz's frequent presence. She catches glimpses of him consulting with his foreman, directing the harvest, ensuring everything proceeds smoothly. She notices how he treats everyone with respect, how his word carries weight without needing to be spoken harshly. Gradually, a pattern emerges. Ruth's daily routine becomes part of the rhythm of Boaz's fields. Her presence, once novel, becomes natural. The other gleaners begin to defer to her judgment, recognizing her wisdom and experience. She becomes a leader among the marginalized, a source of quiet strength. As the barley harvest progresses toward its completion, both Ruth and Boaz find themselves anticipating their daily encounters. Neither speaks of personal matters, but their conversations grow longer, more comfortable. They discuss the weather, the quality of the grain, the progress of the harvest. Beneath these simple topics, deeper currents flow. The community watches with interest as this unusual friendship develops. A wealthy landowner and a foreign widow, an unlikely pair, yet one that seems to make perfect sense to those who know them both. Each brings qualities the other lacks, creating a balance that speaks of divine orchestration. Naomi's bold plan. The barley harvest draws to a close, and with it comes an ending that troubles Naomi's heart. Soon, Ruth will have no reason to work in Boaz's fields. The wheat harvest will follow, but after that, the gleaning season will end. What then will become of her devoted daughter-in-law? Naomi sits in the doorway of their small dwelling, watching Ruth sort through the day's gathering. The younger woman's movements are efficient, practiced. She has learned to separate the grain from the chaff with skill that would make any farmer proud. But this expertise will mean nothing once harvest season concludes. The older woman's mind works through possibilities and problems. Ruth has proven herself capable and hardworking, but her future remains uncertain. She is young, strong, and beautiful, but she is also foreign and widowed. In a society that values security through marriage, her options are limited. Naomi has watched the interaction between Ruth and Boaz with growing interest. She has seen how his eyes follow Ruth's movements, how he finds reasons to speak with her, how his generosity toward her goes beyond mere kindness. She has also observed Ruth's growing comfort in his presence, the way she speaks his name with respect and warmth. An idea begins to form in Naomi's mind, bold, risky, but filled with potential. She has lived long enough to recognize the stirring of attraction between a man and woman. She has also lived long enough to know that sometimes love needs help to find its proper expression. The laws of their people provide a path, though it is not without complications. The tradition of the kinsman redeemer offers hope for widows like Ruth, but it requires action, courage, and careful timing. Naomi begins to see how all the pieces might fit together. She waits until Ruth has finished her work and joined her in the doorway. The evening air is cool, carrying the scent of harvested grain and distant cook fires. It is a peaceful moment, one that invites confidential conversation. "My daughter," Naomi begins, her voice carrying the weight of experience and affection. "Should I not seek rest for you, that it may be well with you?" The question is rhetorical, but it opens the door to deeper discussion. Ruth looks up from her work, surprised by the intensity in Naomi's voice. She has grown accustomed to her mother-in-law's bitterness, to the way grief has hardened her heart. But tonight, something different animates the older woman's features. Naomi continues, her words carefully chosen. She speaks of Boaz, of his kindness, of his character. She reminds Ruth of his position in the community, his reputation for fairness and generosity. She does not need to mention that he is also unmarried, wealthy, and attractive. These facts hang unspoken in the air between them. Then comes the crucial revelation. Boaz is not just a kind stranger who has shown them favor. He is family, a kinsman with ancient obligations and opportunities. The laws of redemption create a bridge between Ruth's need and Boaz's ability to provide. Ruth listens with growing amazement. She had not known of this family connection, had not understood the deeper implications of Boaz's kindness. What she took for simple generosity was actually the beginning of something much more significant. But Naomi's plan goes beyond mere revelation. She has a specific strategy, one that will require Ruth to show courage and take initiative. Tonight, she explains, Boaz will be winnowing barley at the threshing floor. After the work is done, after he has eaten and drunk, he will lie down to rest among the grain. This is Ruth's opportunity. She must wash, anoint herself with oil, put on her best clothing. She must wait until Boaz has settled for the night, then approach him quietly. She must uncover his feet and lie down beside him. Then she must wait for him to discover her presence and respond to her unspoken request. The plan takes Ruth's breath away. It is bold almost to the point of scandal, requiring her to approach a man in the darkness, to make herself vulnerable in ways that could be misunderstood. If anyone sees her, if word spreads before Boaz can respond appropriately, her reputation will be destroyed. Yet as Naomi explains the deeper meaning of the gesture, Ruth begins to understand. This is not mere seduction, but a formal request for redemption. The uncovering of feet is a symbolic act, a way of asking for protection and provision. The covering of the garment represents acceptance and commitment. Naomi's voice grows urgent as she explains the importance of timing. The harvest festival creates the perfect opportunity. Boaz will be in good spirits, satisfied with the success of his crops. He will be alone without the usual crowd of servants and workers. He will be approachable in ways that daylight hours do not allow. Ruth feels fear and excitement warring within her heart. This plan offers the possibility of security, of belonging, of a future bright with promise, but it also demands that she risk everything on one gesture. What if Boaz rejects her? What if he is offended by her presumption? Naomi seems to read her thoughts. She speaks of Boaz's character, of his kindness, of his respect for law and tradition. She reminds Ruth of the favor she has already found in his eyes, of the attention he has shown her. She builds a case for hope based on careful observation and deep understanding. As the evening deepens, Ruth finds her courage growing. She has already taken one enormous risk by following Naomi to Bethlehem. She has already trusted her future to uncertain providence. Why should she hesitate now when the path forward seems so clear? The plan crystallizes in her mind. She will do as Naomi suggests, will trust in Boaz's goodness and the rightness of her cause. She will take the future into her own hands, guided by wisdom and supported by love. The threshing floor scheme night settles over Bethlehem like a gentle blanket. The harvest celebration has wound down, leaving the threshing floor quiet except for the whisper of wind through the grain. Ruth makes her way carefully along the familiar paths, her heart beating with nervous anticipation. She has followed Naomi's instructions precisely. The bath water has washed away the dust of gleaning, leaving her skin soft and clean. The precious oil, saved for special occasions, has been applied with careful attention. Her finest garment, though modest by wealthy standards, transforms her appearance from working woman to someone of dignity and purpose. The threshing floor spreads before her in the moonlight, a circular area where grain has been separated from chaff through the day's work. The winnowing process is complete, leaving neat piles of barley ready for storage. The sweet smell of grain mingles with the cool night air. Ruth pauses at the edge of the threshing floor, gathering her courage. This moment will change everything. Either she will find the security and belonging she has dreamed of, or she will face rejection and possible scandal. There is no middle ground, no safe retreat from the bold step she is about to take. She spots Boaz resting among the grain piles, his form relaxed in sleep. The day's work has been satisfying, the harvest abundant. He lies peacefully, unaware that his life is about to take a dramatic turn. Ruth approaches with careful steps, her bare feet silent on the packed earth. The plan requires precise execution. She must uncover his feet without waking him, then lie down at his feet and wait. The symbolism is ancient and meaningful. She is placing herself under his protection, requesting that he spread his garment over her as a kinsman redeemer. Her hands tremble as she carefully lifts the edge of his cloak, exposing his feet to the cool night air. The gentle breeze that has been helping with the winnowing now serves her purpose, masking any small sounds she might make. She settles herself at his feet, her head bowed in humble supplication. Time passes slowly. Ruth's heart pounds so loudly she fears it might wake him. Every rustle of wind through the grain makes her startle. Every distant sound from the village below causes her to freeze in place. She has committed herself to this course of action, but the waiting tests her resolve. The night deepens. Ruth finds herself praying silently, asking the God of Israel to bless her bold action. She thinks of Naomi waiting at home, of the empty future that stretches before them both without intervention. She thinks of the kindness Boaz has already shown, of the character that has earned him respect throughout the community. Hours pass before Boaz stirs. The cool night air on his feet gradually penetrates his sleep, causing him to shift and reach for his covering. His hand encounters something unexpected, not the familiar texture of his cloak, but the soft warmth of human presence. He wakes with a start, his senses immediately alert. Years of managing property and people have taught him to wake quickly when circumstances require attention. He sits up, peering into the darkness, trying to understand what has disturbed his rest. "Who are you?" he asks, his voice low but not frightened. There's authority in his tone, but also curiosity rather than anger. He has lived long enough to know that unusual circumstances often carry unexpected significance. Ruth's voice comes from the darkness, soft but clear. I am Ruth, your servant. The words carry weight beyond their simple meaning. She is identifying herself not just by name, but by relationship, reminding him of the connection between them. But she does not stop there. Her next words transform the moment from mysterious encounter to formal request. Spread your garment over your servant, for you are a kinsman redeemer. The request hits Boaz like a physical blow. He understands immediately what she is asking, the legal and personal implications of her presence here. She is not merely seeking his protection, but requesting marriage, claiming her right under the law of redemption. His response comes quickly, born of genuine feeling rather than careful consideration. Blessed are you by the Lord, my daughter. The words flow from his heart, revealing how welcome her request truly is. He has thought of her, dreamed of her, but never dared hope she might choose him. He continues speaking, his voice filled with wonder and gratitude. Her latest kindness, he tells her, is even greater than her earlier loyalty to Naomi. She could have pursued younger men, rich or poor, but she has chosen him. The words reveal his own insecurity, his awareness of the age difference between them. Ruth listens to his response with growing relief and joy. He is not angry, not offended by her boldness. Instead, he seems genuinely moved by her choice. The risk she has taken is being rewarded with acceptance and blessing. But Boaz's next words introduce a complication that neither Ruth nor Naomi anticipated. There is indeed a kinsman redeemer for Ruth, but Boaz is not the closest one. Another man has the first right of redemption, and honorable dealing requires that he be given the opportunity to act first. The revelation brings a mixture of disappointment and hope. Ruth's request cannot be fulfilled immediately, but neither has it been rejected. Boaz promises to resolve the matter, to confront the nearer kinsman and determine his intentions. If the man chooses to redeem, so be it. If not, Boaz will gladly fulfill the role himself. For now, Ruth must wait and trust. She has taken her bold step, made her request, and found it welcomed. The final outcome depends on legal proceedings and the decision of a man she has never met. But she has learned tonight that her feelings for Boaz are returned, that her future, whatever it holds, will be shaped by love as well as law. Ruth's proposal of redemption. The darkness wraps around them like a protective cloak, creating an intimate space where two hearts can speak their deepest truths. Ruth remains at Boaz's feet, her posture humble yet determined. The words she has spoken hang in the air between them, carrying the weight of ancient tradition and personal hope. Spread your garment over your servant, for you are a kinsman redeemer. The request reverberates through Boaz's mind, awakening emotions he had kept carefully contained. He has watched Ruth work in his fields, admired her character, wondered about her heart, but he never dared imagine she might choose him, might see in him the answer to her need for security and belonging. Ruth's use of the word servant speaks to her humility, but the request itself demonstrates remarkable courage. She is not merely asking for charity or protection. She is proposing marriage, claiming her right under the law that provides for widows through the redemption of kinsmen. The symbolism of her action speaks volumes. By uncovering his feet and lying down beside him, she has placed herself in the position of one seeking covering, protection, and provision. Her request for his garment to be spread over her echoes the ancient marriage custom where a man's cloak symbolizes his commitment to care for his bride. Boaz sits up fully, his heart racing with the implications of this moment. He has encountered many situations requiring wisdom and judgment, but none that has touched him so personally. The woman he has grown to admire is offering herself to him, trusting in his honor and character. His response comes from the deepest part of his being. Blessed are you by the Lord, my daughter. The words carry divine significance, recognizing that Ruth's presence here is more than coincidence or calculation. He sees the hand of providence in this midnight encounter. He continues, his voice filled with wonder and gratitude. This last kindness you have shown is greater than the first. He understands that Ruth's choice represents another act of selfless love, perhaps even greater than her original loyalty to Naomi. She could have pursued men of her own age, those whose strength and prospects might seem more appealing. She could have sought security through beauty and charm alone. Instead, she has chosen to honor the law of redemption, to seek her future through the proper channels of family obligation and covenant relationship. But even as joy fills his heart, Boaz's sense of justice demands that he address the legal complexities. "Now, my daughter, do not fear," he says, his voice steady and reassuring. "I will do all that you ask, for all my people in the gate know that you are a worthy woman." His words reveal the transformation that has taken place in Ruth's reputation. She came to Bethlehem as a foreign widow, an outsider with no claim on the community's acceptance. Through her character and conduct, she has earned respect and recognition. The people of Bethlehem now see her not as a stranger, but as a woman of valor. This acknowledgement carries profound significance. In a society where reputation determines opportunity, Ruth has achieved something remarkable. She has overcome the barriers of nationality and circumstances through the consistent demonstration of noble character. But Boaz cannot ignore the legal obstacle that stands between them. "However, though it is true that I am a kinsman redeemer, there is a redeemer nearer than I." The words introduce a complication that neither Ruth nor Naomi anticipated in their careful planning. The law of redemption establishes clear priorities. The nearest kinsman has the first right and obligation to redeem. This system exists to ensure that family property remains within the clan, that widows receive proper care, and that the deceased man's name and lineage continue through his redeemed wife's children. Boaz explains the situation with characteristic honesty. He will not claim what rightfully belongs to another, even though his heart yearns to fulfill Ruth's request immediately. His integrity demands that proper procedures be followed, that the nearer kinsman be given the opportunity to act first. "Remain tonight," he tells her, "and in the morning, if he will redeem you, good, let him redeem you. But if he does not wish to redeem you, then I will redeem you, as the Lord lives." The oath is solemn and binding, given in the name of the living God. Ruth receives this promise with a mixture of relief and apprehension. Her bold action has not been rejected, but neither has it been immediately accepted. She must wait, must trust in Boaz's word and character, must hope that the nearer kinsman will choose to step aside. The night continues to wrap around them, but the atmosphere has changed. What began as a desperate gamble has become a conversation between two people who understand each other's hearts. Ruth has learned that her feelings for Boaz are reciprocated, that her future security depends not on manipulation, but on the working out of just and lawful processes. Boaz's response has revealed the depth of his character. He could have taken advantage of the situation, could have compromised Ruth's reputation or his own honor. Instead, he has received her request with dignity and respect, promising to resolve the matter through proper channels. As the hours pass, both Ruth and Boaz find themselves changed by this encounter. She has discovered the courage to claim her future, to trust in love as well as law. He has learned that his careful, ordered life is about to be transformed by the arrival of a woman whose character matches his own. The proposal of redemption has been made and received. Now comes the wait for morning, when legal proceedings will determine whether love can find its proper expression through the ancient pathways of covenant and commitment. The complication dawn approaches with its soft gray light, but the revelation of the night has created a shadow that dims the hope Ruth carried to the threshing floor. The nearer kinsman, unnamed, unknown to her, but possessing legal rights that stand between her and the security she seeks. Boaz's words echo in her mind as she lies in the pre-dawn darkness. Another man holds the first claim to redemption, another man whose decision will determine her fate. The careful plan she and Naomi crafted has encountered an obstacle they never anticipated. The law of redemption follows strict order. Family lines determine responsibility and privilege. The nearest kinsman bears the primary obligation to redeem widows and property, to ensure that the deceased man's name and inheritance continue. This system provides security for families but creates complications when hearts become involved. Ruth struggles to understand the full implications. She has revealed her heart to Boaz, has placed herself in his hands, only to learn that another man's choice will determine her future. The bold step she took in approaching him may have been premature, may have created hope that cannot be fulfilled. But Boaz's response offers reassurance even as it introduces uncertainty. His joy at her request was genuine, his promise to resolve the matter sincere. He will not abandon her to an unknown fate, but will work within the law to find a solution that honors both justice and love. The complication extends beyond personal feelings to practical concerns. The nearer kinsman may choose to redeem Ruth, may claim her as his wife according to his rights. If so, she will be bound to accept his decision, will become part of his household rather than Boaz's. Alternatively, the kinsman may refuse redemption, may decide that the obligations outweigh the benefits. In that case, the right passes to Boaz and Ruth's bold proposal can be fulfilled. But she cannot know which path the unknown man will choose. Boaz explains the situation with characteristic honesty. He will not mislead her about the challenges they face, will not make promises he cannot keep. Instead, he offers what he can, his commitment to pursue the matter properly, his determination to seek the best outcome possible. The legal proceedings will take place at the city gate, where elders gather to witness important transactions. This public forum ensures that all decisions are made openly, that proper procedures are followed, that the rights of all parties are protected. But it also means that Ruth's future will be debated before the entire community. She thinks of Naomi waiting at home, wondering how the night's venture has progressed. The older woman's hopes rest on this plan. Her own future security depends on Ruth's success. The complication affects not just Ruth, but the woman who has guided her through this foreign land. The unnamed kinsman becomes a figure of mystery and anxiety. Ruth knows nothing of his character, his circumstances, his likely response to the opportunity of redemption. He may be young or old, kind or harsh, wealthy or struggling. His decision will be based on considerations she cannot anticipate. Property rights complicate the situation further. Redemption involves not just marriage, but the purchase of land, the assumption of financial responsibilities. The nearer kinsman must weigh the costs against the benefits, must consider how redemption will affect his own estate and family. Ruth realizes that her foreign birth may influence the decision. Some men might welcome the opportunity to marry a young widow, but others might hesitate to take a Moabite wife. Her nationality, which has been gradually accepted in Bethlehem, might become a barrier in this crucial moment. The economic implications create additional uncertainty. Redemption requires resources, the ability to purchase property and support a wife. If the nearer kinsman lacks sufficient wealth, he may be forced to decline regardless of his personal inclinations. Boaz's own position in this complex situation requires careful navigation. He cannot simply claim what he wants, but must respect the legal order that governs their society. His desire to help Ruth must be balanced against his obligation to honor the rights of others. The morning light grows stronger, highlighting the complexity of the situation. What seemed like a clear path forward has become a maze of legal obligations and uncertain outcomes. Ruth must trust in Boaz's wisdom and integrity, must hope that the same providence that brought her to his fields will guide the resolution of this complication. The night has changed everything and nothing. Her heart has been revealed and welcomed, but her future remains uncertain. The proposal of redemption has been made, but its fulfillment depends on the decision of a man she has never met. She has taken her bold step, and now she must wait for the consequences to unfold. Boaz's promise. The first hints of dawn begin to paint the eastern sky, but Boaz is not ready to let this moment end. The woman lying at his feet has transformed his orderly world with her courage and devotion. He will not send her away empty-handed, will not let her face the uncertainty ahead without tangible evidence of his commitment. Lie down until morning, he tells her gently. The words carry protective warmth and assurance that she is safe in his care. He will not compromise her reputation by allowing her to be seen leaving the threshing floor in darkness, but neither will he send her into the night alone and vulnerable. Ruth settles back into place, her heart lighter despite the complication they have discussed. Boaz's promise rings in her memory, sworn in the name of the living God. Whatever obstacles lie ahead, she will not face them alone. This good man has pledged his efforts on her behalf. The hours pass in companionable silence. Neither sleeps, but both find peace in the quiet presence of the other. The grain around them carries the sweet scent of harvest abundance, a reminder of the provision that has brought them together. The stars fade gradually as dawn approaches. When the sky grows light enough to distinguish shapes but not yet bright enough to identify faces, Boaz stirs. This is the moment for Ruth to depart, when she can make her way home without being recognized. Her reputation must be protected, her bold action kept private until the proper time for revelation. But Boaz will not let her go empty-handed. He calls for his cloak, the large outer garment that serves as both covering and container. "Bring the cloak that is on you and hold it," he instructs. Ruth spreads the garment wide, creating a makeshift basket. Boaz measures out 6 measures of barley, a generous portion that speaks of abundance rather than mere charity. Each scoop of grain represents his commitment to provide for her, his recognition of her worth, his promise that she will not lack for provision while they await the resolution of her case. The grain fills her cloak until it becomes heavy with blessing. This is not the meager gleaning of a desperate woman, but the generous gift of a man who values her beyond measure. The weight of the barley speaks of security, of a future bright with possibility. "Do not go empty to your mother-in-law," Boaz tells her as he helps arrange the laden cloak. His words acknowledge the bond between Ruth and Naomi, the shared future that depends on this night's outcome. He understands that Ruth's security includes provision for the woman who has guided her through this foreign land. Ruth receives the gift with gratitude that goes beyond words. The barley represents more than food. It is a token of hope, a promise of protection, a sign that her bold action has found favor in the eyes of the man she has chosen. She can return to Naomi with evidence of success even before the final outcome is determined. As she prepares to leave, Boaz speaks words that will sustain her through the uncertain hours ahead. The man will not rest until he has settled the matter today. His voice carries the authority of one who knows the character of honorable men, the certainty of one who understands the weight of promises made in sacred spaces. This assurance transforms Ruth's departure from anxious retreat to confident journey. She need not wonder if Boaz will remember his promise, need not fear that delay will weaken his resolve. He has committed himself to action, has pledged to resolve the matter without unnecessary delay. The promise encompasses more than mere intention. Boaz is a man of influence and standing, capable of bringing together the parties necessary for legal resolution. His word is weight in the community. His character commands respect from elders and kinsmen alike. Ruth makes her way home through the quiet streets, her burden of grain a welcome weight on her shoulders. The barley bounces gently with each step, a rhythmic reminder of the generosity she has encountered. The gift will provide for several days, but more importantly, it provides hope for the future. Behind her, Boaz remains at the threshing floor, his mind already working through the challenges ahead. The nearer kinsman must be approached, the legal requirements fulfilled, the proper procedures followed, but he faces these tasks with joy rather than dread, knowing that each step brings him closer to the woman who has captured his heart. The promise he has made is more than words spoken in the darkness. It is a commitment sealed by divine witness, a pledge that will guide his actions through the crucial hours ahead. He will not rest until the matter is settled, will not allow uncertainty to cloud Ruth's future longer than necessary. The morning light grows stronger, illuminating the path ahead. Ruth carries with her the tangible evidence of Boaz's favor and the intangible assurance of his promise. Together, these gifts will sustain her through the waiting that lies ahead, will remind her that love and law can work together to create security and belonging. The night at the threshing floor has ended, but its consequences will reshape 2 lives and touch the destiny of generations yet unborn. The promise has been made, the commitment sealed, the future set in motion by courage and kindness meeting in the darkness. Naomi's watchful waiting. The door opens quietly, and Ruth steps into the modest dwelling she shares with Naomi. The older woman has not slept, has spent the night pacing and praying, wondering how her bold plan has unfolded. The sight of Ruth's laden cloak brings immediate relief and curiosity. "Who are you, my daughter?" Naomi asks, but the question carries deeper meaning than simple identification. She wants to know what has transpired, what identity Ruth now carries, what future lies ahead for them both. The weight of the barley suggests success, but Naomi needs to hear the full story. Ruth sets down her burden and begins to recount the night's events. She speaks of approaching Boaz in the darkness, of making her request for redemption, of his joyful response. Her voice carries wonder as she describes his blessing, his recognition of her worth, his promise to resolve the matter. But then comes the complication that neither woman anticipated. The nearer kinsman, the legal obstacle that stands between Ruth and her desired future. Naomi's expression shifts as she processes this unexpected development, her mind immediately grasping the implications. Yet as Ruth continues her account, describing Boaz's solemn promise and generous gift, Naomi's concern gives way to cautious optimism. She knows men of honor, understands the weight of promises made in sacred circumstances. If Boaz has pledged to resolve the matter, she believes he will fulfill that commitment. The 6 measures of barley speak volumes about Boaz's intentions. This is not a polite dismissal disguised as charity, but a substantial gift that demonstrates serious commitment. The quantity suggests abundance, provision, and a future bright with possibility. Naomi examines the grain with experienced hands, noting its quality and freshness. This comes from the best of the harvest, grain that could command premium prices in the market. Boaz has given from his abundance, has shared his blessing with the woman who has captured his heart. "Sit still, my daughter," Naomi advises, her voice carrying the wisdom of years and the authority of experience. "Until you know how the matter will fall, for the man will not rest until he has settled it today." Her words reveal deep understanding of masculine character and legal process. She knows that men of honor do not make empty promises, that delays in such matters often spring from uncertainty rather than indifference. Boaz's immediate commitment to action speaks of resolved purpose. The waiting begins, but it is not passive or anxious. Naomi busies herself with preparations, understanding that this day may bring dramatic changes to their circumstances. She sorts through their meager possessions, considering what will be needed if Ruth's future is settled favorably. Ruth finds herself unable to concentrate on ordinary tasks. Her mind returns repeatedly to the events of the night, to the moment when Boaz's voice filled with joy at her request, to the weight of his promise hanging in the morning air. She has taken her bold step, and now she must trust in the outcome. The barley provides immediate comfort and longer-term security. Naomi prepares a portion for their morning meal, and both women note how the grain tastes of blessing and hope. Even if the final outcome remains uncertain, they have this tangible evidence of favor and provision. As the morning progresses, Naomi shares her understanding of the legal processes that will determine Ruth's fate. The city gate will become a courtroom where elders gather to witness important transactions. The nearer kinsman will be called to account, will be required to state his intentions regarding redemption. She explains the complexities that may influence the decision. Property rights, family obligations, economic considerations, all these factors will weigh in the balance. The kinsman must consider not just the opportunity to marry a young widow, but the cost of purchasing land and assuming financial responsibilities. Ruth listens with growing appreciation for the intricacies of the system that governs their society. What seemed like a simple request for marriage involves complex legal and economic considerations. Her foreign birth adds another layer of complexity, another factor that may influence the outcome. But Naomi's confidence in Boaz grows stronger as she considers his character and position. He is a man of influence and integrity, capable of navigating the legal requirements while pursuing the outcome he desires. His promise to resolve the matter quickly suggests both capability and determination. The day stretches ahead, filled with uncertainty, but also with hope. Ruth has done what she could, has taken the bold action that circumstances required. Now she must wait, must trust in Boaz's word and in the providence that has guided her steps from Moab to this moment. Naomi watches her daughter-in-law with mixture of admiration and concern. Ruth's courage has created opportunity, but the final outcome depends on factors beyond their control. The older woman's experience teaches her that waiting is often the hardest part of any endeavor. Together, they settle into the rhythm of watchful waiting. The grain is evidence of blessing received. The promise is assurance of effort yet to come. Between gift and fulfillment lies the space of trust, the time when hope must sustain itself on faith rather than sight. The city gate negotiation. The morning sun climbs higher over Bethlehem, casting long shadows across the plaza where the city gate stands. This ancient threshold serves as more than mere entrance to the town. It is the heart of legal and commercial life, the place where elders gather to witness important transactions and settle disputes. Boaz arrives early, his purposeful stride betraying the urgency he feels despite his outward calm. He has given his word to Ruth, has promised to resolve the matter without delay. The night's events have crystallized his intentions, have transformed possibility into determination. The gate area begins to fill with the usual morning activity. Merchants arrange their wares, farmers bring produce to market, citizens conduct the business that keeps the community functioning. But today, this ordinary space will witness extraordinary proceedings. Boaz positions himself strategically, where he can observe the traffic flowing through the gate. He knows the habits of the nearer kinsman, understands the man's usual routines. Patience and preparation will serve him better than hasty action in this delicate negotiation. The elders begin to gather, drawn by the scent of important business in the air. These men have presided over countless transactions, have seen the rise and fall of family fortunes, have guided the community through generations of change. Their presence lends gravity to any proceeding. Then Boaz sees his target, the nearer kinsman walking toward the gate with his usual unhurried pace. The man appears prosperous but not wealthy, established but not prominent. His bearing suggests competence without particular distinction, the comfortable mediocrity of moderate success. "Turn aside, friend, sit down here," Boaz calls out, using the formal address that signals serious business. The kinsman pauses, surprised by the direct approach but unable to ignore the summons. Social protocol demands that he respond to Boaz's invitation. The kinsman settles beside Boaz, his expression mixing curiosity with caution. He recognizes the signs of formal business, understands that this encounter will involve more than casual conversation. The presence of gathering elders confirms the significance of the moment. Boaz wastes no time in assembling the required witnesses. "Take a seat here," he calls to 10 of the elders, the number prescribed by law for witnessing important transactions. These men represent the community's wisdom and authority, their presence ensuring that all proceedings are conducted properly. The stage is set for a drama that will determine Ruth's future. The nearer kinsman sits unknowing, about to be offered an opportunity that may seem attractive on the surface, but carries hidden complications. Boaz prepares to present the case with careful strategy. Naomi, who has returned from the country of Moab, is selling the piece of land that belonged to our brother Elimelech, Boaz begins. His words are carefully chosen, presenting the opportunity in terms that emphasize family obligation and economic advantage. The kinsman's attention sharpens immediately. Land represents security, status, and potential profit. The prospect of acquiring property from a distressed seller appeals to his business instincts. He leans forward, interested in hearing more details. Boaz continues methodically, laying out the legal framework that governs the transaction. "I thought to inform you of it and say, buy it in the presence of those sitting here and in the presence of the elders of my people." The formal language creates binding obligation, ensures that any decision will be witnessed and recorded. The offer seems straightforward, almost too good to be true. Distressed property at favorable terms, family connection providing insider access, community elders serving as witnesses to legitimate the transaction. The kinsman's response comes quickly, driven by obvious self-interest. "I will redeem it," he declares, his voice carrying the satisfaction of a man who recognizes a profitable opportunity. The words echo across the plaza, witnessed by the assembled elders and curious onlookers. The commitment appears final and binding. But Boaz has not finished presenting the full terms of the transaction. His next words will transform the kinsman's enthusiasm into careful reconsideration, will reveal the hidden costs that accompany this apparent opportunity. "On the day you buy the field from the hand of Naomi, you also acquire Ruth the Moabite, the widow of the deceased, in order to perpetuate the name of the deceased on his inheritance." The additional revelation hits the kinsman like a physical blow. The simple property transaction has become something far more complex. He is not merely purchasing land, but accepting responsibility for a widow, committing to marriage, and the support of future children who will bear another man's name. The silence that follows is heavy with calculation. The kinsman's mind races through the implications, weighing costs against benefits, considering how this obligation will affect his own estate and family. The attractive land deal has become a potential burden. Ruth's foreign birth adds another layer of complexity. Taking a Moabite wife carries social implications, cultural challenges, and potential complications for his existing family relationships. What seemed like a simple business transaction has become a life-altering commitment. The assembled elders watch with interest as the kinsman struggles with his decision. They understand the full implications of redemption, recognize the weight of the choice before him. Their presence ensures that whatever decision he makes will be witnessed and binding. Boaz waits patiently, his expression neutral, but his heart racing. The next words from the kinsman's lips will determine Ruth's future, will either fulfill or frustrate the promise he made at the threshing floor. Everything depends on how this ordinary man weighs opportunity against obligation. Boaz secures redemption. The morning sun casts long shadows across the city gate as Boaz rises to address the assembled men. His voice carries the weight of tradition and the promise he made to Ruth in the darkness of the threshing floor. The closer kinsman sits before him, unaware that his next words will shape destinies. Boaz speaks with measured calm. He presents the matter step by step, first mentioning Naomi's field that requires redemption. The closer kinsman nods eagerly. This seems simple enough. Land means wealth, and wealth means security. But Boaz pauses, letting the moment breathe before revealing the deeper truth. When you redeem the field, Boaz continues, you also acquire Ruth the Moabite, the widow of Mahlon. The words hang in the air like morning mist. The closer kinsman's expression shifts. His eagerness fades as the full weight of the law becomes clear. Ruth represents more than just a wife. She carries the obligation to raise children in her dead husband's name. The Redeemer's own inheritance would be divided. His legacy would serve another's memory. The closer kinsman's silence speaks volumes as he weighs profit against responsibility. The elders watch this careful dance of law and custom. They understand what Boaz has done. He has presented the matter with perfect legal precision, but also with strategic wisdom. The choice now rests with the closer kinsman, yet Boaz has shaped the decision without forcing it. I cannot redeem it, the closer kinsman finally declares. It would endanger my own inheritance. You redeem it yourself. He removes his sandal and hands it to Boaz. This simple act carries the power of legal contract. The sandal represents the transfer of right and responsibility. Boaz accepts the sandal with quiet dignity. He lifts it high for all to see, then turns to address the gathered witnesses. His voice rings clear across the courtyard. You are witnesses today that I have acquired all that belonged to Elimelech and all that belonged to Chilion and Mahlon from the hand of Naomi. The formal words carry deeper meaning. Boaz claims not just property, but the broken threads of a family's story. He steps into the role of redeemer with full understanding of its weight. The gathered men nod their acknowledgement. They have witnessed the legal transfer, but more than that, they have seen grace in action. Moreover, Boaz continues, I have acquired Ruth the Moabite, the widow of Mahlon, to be my wife. The words transform Ruth from foreign widow to beloved bride. The elders murmur their approval. They see the wisdom in this union, the way it weaves together law and love. The blessing begins immediately. The elders speak in unison, their voices creating a chorus of benediction. May the Lord make the woman who is coming into your house like Rachel and Leah, who together built the house of Israel. They invoke the mothers of the nation, placing Ruth among the honored matriarchs. May you act worthily in Ephrathah and be renowned in Bethlehem, they continue. The blessing extends beyond the couple to encompass their future generations. The elders see farther than the present moment. They speak of legacy and lasting impact. The crowd that has gathered speaks their own blessing. May your house be like the house of Perez, whom Tamar bore to Judah because of the offspring that the Lord will give you by this young woman. The reference to Tamar carries special meaning. She too was a foreign woman who became part of Israel's story through brave action. Boaz stands transformed. No longer just a wealthy landowner, he has become a kinsman redeemer in the truest sense. He has chosen love over convenience, responsibility over profit. The sandal in his hand represents not just legal right, but moral courage. The witnesses begin to disperse, but the weight of what they have seen lingers. They have watched the law work as it was meant to work. Justice and mercy have embraced. The foreign woman has found her place, and the bitter widow has found her hope. As the sun climbs higher, Boaz makes his way back to his fields. But everything has changed. The grain that waves in the morning breeze now carries new meaning. It will feed not just his household, but the family he has chosen to redeem. The harvest that began with Ruth's gleaning now culminates in the harvest of love. The city gate empties, but the story it has witnessed spreads through Bethlehem like ripples on still water. The townspeople speak of Boaz's generosity and Ruth's worthiness. They sense that they have been part of something larger than a simple business transaction. Ruth waits at home, unaware yet of her transformation from gleaner to bride. Naomi sits beside her, hope flickering in her heart for the first time in years. The morning that began with legal formality will end with the promise of new beginnings. The sandal that changed hands carries within it the power to change lives. What seemed like a simple piece of leather becomes the instrument of redemption. The closer kinsman's refusal becomes the pathway to a greater yes. In the economy of grace, even rejection serves a purpose. The marriage of Boaz and Ruth. The wedding preparations begin with whispered excitement throughout Bethlehem. Word spreads quickly through the narrow streets and busy marketplaces. Boaz, the respected landowner, will marry Ruth, the Moabite gleaner. The town buzzes with anticipation and curiosity. Naomi emerges from her grief-shadowed house with new purpose. Her hands, idle for so long, now move with deliberate care. She prepares her daughter-in-law for marriage, her movements carrying the weight of tradition and the lightness of hope. The woman who once asked to be called Mara now speaks of joy. Ruth stands before the polished bronze mirror, transformed. The simple garments of a gleaner give way to the fine fabrics of a bride. Naomi's careful hands arrange the wedding attire, each fold and drape speaking of love and acceptance. The foreign woman becomes a daughter of Israel through the gentle ministry of preparation. The wedding garments tell their own story. The colors chosen reflect both tradition and new beginnings. The fabric speaks of Boaz's provision and Ruth's worthiness. Every thread woven into the design carries meaning. This is not merely clothing, but the visible sign of transformation. Boaz arrives dressed in his finest robes, but his true adornment is the joy that radiates from his face. His friends and kinsmen gather around him, their voices raised in celebration. The man who has redeemed land and bride stands ready to receive the fullness of his blessing. The ceremony takes place in the heart of Bethlehem, where the community can witness this union of hearts and histories. The elders who blessed the couple at the city gate now stand ready to officiate their joining. The same voices that invoked Rachel and Leah now speak the words that bind husband and wife. Under the canopy of tradition, Boaz and Ruth exchange vows that echo through generations. Their words carry the weight of covenant and the lightness of love. The promises they make reach beyond their own happiness to embrace the future generations that will spring from their union. Ruth's voice, so often heard in fields and houses, now speaks the words that will define her new identity. She who once declared her loyalty to Naomi now pledges her life to Boaz. The same heart that chose the hard path of faithfulness now chooses the blessed path of love. The wedding feast spreads through the streets of Bethlehem. Tables groan under the weight of Boaz's provision. The bread and wine flow freely, symbols of abundance after years of scarcity. The town that once whispered of Naomi's bitterness now celebrates Ruth's blessing. Music fills the air as the celebration continues into the evening. The sounds of joy replace the sounds of mourning that have echoed through Naomi's house for so long. Instruments that have been silent find their voice again. The rhythm of celebration drowns out the memory of sorrow. The women of Bethlehem gather around Ruth, their earlier curiosity transformed into genuine affection. They see in her face the beauty of faithful love rewarded. The foreign woman who once seemed so different now appears as one of their own. Her courage has won their hearts. Children run between the tables, their laughter adding to the symphony of celebration. They chase each other through the crowds, their joy infectious and pure. The future generations that will spring from this union dance in the present moment, though they remain unseen. As night falls, the celebration takes on a deeper quality. The torches that light the feast cast dancing shadows on the walls of the ancient city. The flames speak of the eternal nature of love and the way it illuminates even the darkest places. This marriage is more than the joining of two hearts. It is the rekindling of hope. Naomi sits at the place of honor, her transformation complete. The woman who returned to Bethlehem empty now witnesses the fullness of God's provision. Her daughter-in-law's joy becomes her own. The bitter root of her grief has blossomed into the sweet fruit of celebration. The wedding gifts pile high, each offering a symbol of the community's blessing. Grain and oil, cloth and pottery, jewelry and livestock, all speak of the abundance that surrounds this union. The couple who began with so little now receives the overflow of generous hearts. As the formal ceremony concludes and the couple prepares to begin their new life together, the entire town seems to exhale in satisfaction. They have witnessed something beautiful and right. The story that began with famine and death has reached its turning point in love and new beginnings. The stars that shine down on Bethlehem seem brighter on this night. The same sky that witnessed Naomi's return now watches over Ruth's triumph. The celestial lights that have seen so much sorrow now illuminate pure joy. The marriage of Boaz and Ruth marks not just the end of one chapter, but the beginning of a legacy that will echo through eternity. The wedding night passes in blessed quietude, while the town settles into peaceful sleep. The celebration has ended, but the joy remains. Tomorrow will bring new challenges and new opportunities, but tonight belongs to love triumphant. The birth of Obed, months pass in gentle rhythm as Ruth settles into her new life as Boaz's wife. The barley fields where she once gleaned now welcome her as their mistress. The house that seemed so distant during her days of poverty now wraps around her like a warm embrace. Love has transformed the landscape of her life. Naomi watches the changes with wonder. Her daughter-in-law moves through the house with growing confidence, her belly rounding with new life. The woman who once returned empty now prepares to welcome the next generation. Hope takes physical form in the child growing within Ruth's womb. The pregnancy progresses with remarkable peace. Ruth's strength seems to increase rather than diminish as the months unfold. The same resilience that carried her through widowhood and poverty now sustains her through the sacred work of carrying new life. Her body becomes a temple of promise. Boaz tends to his wife with gentle devotion. The man who showed kindness to a foreign gleaner now lavishes care upon the mother of his child. His hands, so skilled in the harvest fields, learn new gentleness in caring for his growing family. Love multiplies in the giving. The women of Bethlehem gather around Ruth as her time approaches. They bring their wisdom and their stories, their practical help, and their emotional support. The foreign woman who once stood apart now finds herself embraced by the sisterhood of mothers. Community forms around the sacred act of birth. When the labor pains begin, Ruth faces them with the same courage that brought her from Moab to Bethlehem. The strength that carried her through loss and uncertainty now carries her through the intensity of bringing forth life. Each contraction becomes a prayer, each breath a declaration of faith. The midwives work with skilled hands and gentle words. They have assisted at countless births, but this one carries special meaning. The child being born represents more than just another generation. This birth signals the restoration of a broken family line and the fulfillment of ancient promises. Naomi paces outside the birthing chamber, her heart alternating between prayer and worry. She has lost so much to death that the prospect of new life fills her with both hope and fear. The woman who once felt cursed now dares to believe in blessing. Her steps trace the path between past sorrow and future joy. The birth cry pierces the morning air, strong and clear. Ruth's travail ends in triumph as she holds her son for the first time. The baby's lusty cries announce his arrival to the world and proclaim the goodness of God to all who hear. New life has conquered the dominion of death. Boaz enters the chamber with tears streaming down his face. The man who has redeemed land and bride now beholds the fruit of his redemption. His son lies in Ruth's arms, perfect and beautiful. The harvest of love has produced its most precious yield. The midwife cleans the baby with tender care, her experienced hands gentle but sure. She wraps him in soft cloth and presents him to his parents with a smile of satisfaction. Another successful birth, another small miracle accomplished. The continuity of life flows through her ministrations. Ruth holds her son with wonder and exhaustion. The child she has carried for months now rests in her arms, no longer a mystery but a person. His tiny fingers grasp at the air, his eyes blink in the sudden brightness. The future has taken human form. The name comes to them clearly, Obed, meaning servant or worshiper. The choice reflects both humility and hope. This child will serve a purpose greater than himself. His life will worship the God who brings beauty from ashes and joy from mourning. News of the birth spreads quickly through Bethlehem. The townspeople who witnessed the wedding now celebrate the birth. They understand that they have been part of something significant. The foreign woman has given birth to a son who belongs fully to Israel. The women of the town gather to offer their congratulations and to marvel at the baby. They see in Obed's face the features of both parents, but also something more. This child carries the promise of future generations. His birth marks a new chapter in the story of God's people. Naomi receives her grandson with trembling hands. The woman who thought her line had ended now holds the continuation of her family's story. The emptiness that defined her return to Bethlehem gives way to the fullness of this moment. Her arms, empty for so long, now cradle hope incarnate. The baby's first days pass in a haze of wonder and adjustment. Ruth learns the rhythms of motherhood while Boaz discovers the joys of fatherhood. The house that once echoed with the sounds of business now rings with the gentle sounds of family life. Love has found its perfect expression. Obed's presence transforms the household in ways both seen and unseen. His cries call forth responses of care and protection. His sleep brings peace to the entire family. His very existence redefines what it means to be home. The child who began as promise now lives as fulfillment. The circumcision ceremony takes place on the 8th day, marking Obed's formal entry into the covenant community. The ritual that has been performed for generations now welcomes this particular child into the ancient promises. His identity as a son of Israel is confirmed by the ancient rite. As the weeks pass, Obed grows stronger and more alert. His eyes begin to focus on the faces that surround him with love. His responses become more distinct and purposeful. The child who was once just potential now shows the first signs of personality and character. The harvest season arrives with special meaning for the family. The fields that first brought Ruth and Boaz together now wave with grain that will feed their son. The cycle of sowing and reaping takes on new significance when viewed through the lens of family legacy. Naomi's restoration. The transformation begins quietly, like dawn breaking over the hills of Bethlehem. Naomi stands at the threshold of her house, holding her grandson close to her heart. The weight of this small life presses against the hollow places in her chest, filling them with warmth she had forgotten possible. The women of the town gather in her courtyard, their voices creating a chorus of celebration. They have watched Naomi's journey from the depths of bitterness to this moment of restoration. Their words carry the weight of witness and the joy of shared triumph. Blessed be the Lord, they declare, who has not left you without a redeemer today. Their blessing acknowledges the divine hand that has worked through human love to bring about this restoration. They see in Obed not just a baby, but the visible sign of God's faithfulness. The women continue their blessing, their voices rising in excitement. May his name be renowned in Israel, and may he be to you a restorer of life and a nourisher of your old age. They speak prophetically, seeing beyond the present moment to the impact this child will have on generations yet unborn. Naomi's face glows with a light that has been absent for years. The bitter lines around her eyes soften into laugh lines. The mouth that spoke of emptiness now curves in gentle smiles. The woman who asked to be called Mara rediscovers her identity as Naomi, the pleasant one. She holds Obed with the reverence of one who has learned to treasure what is precious. Her hands, weathered by sorrow and hardship, cradle the baby with infinite tenderness. The grandmother who thought she would never hold a grandchild now experiences the fulfillment of her deepest longings. The baby responds to Naomi's touch with contentment. His small body relaxes against her familiar embrace. The bond between grandmother and grandchild forms in these quiet moments, creating a connection that will last throughout their lives. Love bridges the gap between generations. Ruth watches from nearby, her heart full as she observes the restoration taking place. The woman who pledged to follow Naomi now witnesses the fruit of that commitment. Her loyalty has not only secured her own future, but has also redeemed the woman she chose to love. The neighbors speak among themselves, marveling at the change in Naomi. They remember the broken woman who returned from Moab, speaking of bitterness and loss. Now they see that same woman transformed by love and hope. The story of redemption unfolds before their eyes. Boaz joins the gathering, his presence adding to the atmosphere of celebration. He sees in Naomi's joy the completion of his own redemptive work. The man who chose to redeem land and bride now witnesses the restoration of a broken heart. His kindness has multiplied beyond his expectations. The afternoon light filters through the courtyard, casting everything in golden hues. The ordinary moments take on sacred quality as the family experiences the fullness of blessing. Time seems to slow, allowing each person to savor the richness of this restoration. Naomi begins to speak, her voice carrying a strength that has been absent for years. She tells the gathered women about the faithfulness of God, how he has turned her mourning into dancing. Her testimony becomes a song of praise that lifts the hearts of all who hear. The baby stirs in her arms, his tiny hands reaching toward her face. Naomi laughs, a sound that surprises everyone, including herself. The laughter bubbles up from depths that have been sealed by sorrow, now opened by joy. The sound of her happiness echoes through the courtyard. The women begin to share their own stories of God's faithfulness. Each testimony adds to the growing chorus of praise. They speak of answered prayers and unexpected blessings, of ways that God has worked through difficult circumstances to bring about good. The gathering becomes a celebration of divine grace. As evening approaches, the formal gathering begins to disperse, but the family remains together. Naomi continues to hold Obed, reluctant to let him go. The child who represents her restoration sleeps peacefully in her arms, unaware of the profound impact his presence has made. Ruth prepares the evening meal while Naomi tends to the baby. The simple domestic activities take on new meaning in the context of their restored family. The table that once seemed too large for the remnant of their household now perfectly accommodates their growing family. The conversation at dinner focuses on the future. Plans are made for Obed's upbringing, for the inheritance he will receive, for the role he will play in the community. The family that once lived day to day now has the luxury of planning for generations to come. Naomi's prayers that evening carry a different tone than those of recent years. Instead of pleas for relief from suffering, she offers thanks for blessings received. The woman who once felt abandoned by God now speaks to him as a loving friend. Her relationship with the divine has been restored along with her circumstances. The night passes peacefully, with Obed sleeping soundly in his cradle. Naomi wakes several times, not from anxiety, but from the simple desire to look upon her grandson. Each glimpse of his peaceful face reinforces the reality of her transformation. The dawn of the next day brings with it a sense of new beginnings. Naomi rises with energy she has not felt in years. The woman who once dragged herself through each day now embraces the possibilities that lie ahead. Her restoration is complete, her identity reclaimed. The household comes alive with purpose and joy. The rooms that once echoed with the sounds of grief now ring with the sounds of family life. Obed's presence has not only restored Naomi's heart, but has also transformed the very atmosphere of their home. The neighbors who gather for their morning conversations notice the change immediately. Naomi's posture is straighter, her voice clearer, her eyes brighter. The woman who once seemed defeated by life now radiates the confidence of one who has experienced divine restoration. Legacy and lineage. The years pass like gentle seasons, each bringing its own gifts and challenges. Obed grows from infant to child, his laughter filling the house that once knew only silence. The boy who began as promise now walks and talks, his presence a constant reminder of God's faithfulness to the family he has redeemed. Ruth watches her son with the wonder of a mother who understands the miracle of his existence. The child who plays in the courtyard carries within him the convergence of two peoples, two stories, two destinies. His Moabite mother's courage and his Israelite father's faithfulness flow together in his young life. Naomi delights in her grandson with the pure joy of a grandmother who has seen her family's story continued. The woman who once feared that her line would end now watches the next generation take shape. Obed's childhood games and innocent questions breathe life into her aging heart. Boaz trains the boy in the ways of the land and the customs of the people. The man who redeemed Ruth and Naomi now passes on the wisdom of generations to his son. The fields that witness their love story become the classroom where Obed learns about harvest and blessing. The townspeople watch Obed's growth with special interest. They remember the circumstances of his birth, the restoration of his family, the blessing that came through his parents' union. The child who represents redemption in microcosm now carries their hopes for the future. As Obed reaches young manhood, he displays the character traits that mark him as worthy of his heritage. His strength comes from his father, his loyalty from his mother, his wisdom from his grandmother. The streams of influence that shaped him flow together in a personality marked by integrity and purpose. The day comes when Obed takes a wife and begins a family of his own. The wedding celebration echoes the joy of his parents' union, but with the added blessing of continuity. The story that began with loss and redemption now continues with hope and promise. Ruth becomes a grandmother herself, her arms once again holding new life. The woman who left Moab as a childless widow now cradles her grandchildren with the confidence of one who has learned to trust in divine timing. Her journey from emptiness to fullness finds its ultimate expression in the next generation. Naomi, now advanced in years, sees the multiplication of her family with deep satisfaction. The woman who returned to Bethlehem with nothing now witnesses the abundance that has grown from her empty hands. Her legacy extends beyond her own life into the lives of children she will never meet. The birth of Jesse, Obed's son, marks another milestone in the unfolding story. The boy who will become the father of kings enters the world quietly, his significance hidden in the ordinary moments of family life. The future lies wrapped in swaddling clothes, waiting for its appointed time. The genealogical records that carefully preserve the lineage of Israel now include names that once seemed impossible. Ruth the Moabite takes her place among the mothers of the nation. Her foreign birth becomes not a liability, but a testimony to the inclusive nature of God's grace. The story spreads beyond Bethlehem as travelers carry news of the remarkable family. The tale of the foreign woman who became an ancestral mother captures the imagination of those who hear it. The narrative of redemption finds new audiences with each telling. Obed grows into a man of substance and character, his reputation spreading throughout the region. The boy who was born from the union of love and law now establishes himself as a pillar of the community. His very existence validates the risks taken by his parents and grandmother. The land that Boaz redeemed flourishes under careful stewardship. The fields that once knew famine now yield abundant harvests. The property that passed from hand to hand through the law of redemption now serves as the foundation for a lasting legacy. Jesse's childhood passes in the security of a family that knows its place in the larger story. The boy who will father David grows up hearing the tales of his grandmother Ruth and great-grandmother Naomi. The stories of faithfulness and redemption shape his understanding of God's character. The aging Ruth finds comfort in the knowledge that her decision to follow Naomi has borne fruit beyond her wildest imagination. The choice made on a dusty road in Moab now resonates through the generations. Her loyalty has become the foundation of a dynasty. Naomi's final years pass in the contentment of a woman who has seen God's faithfulness in her lifetime. The bitter woman who asked to be called Mara now faces eternity with the peace of one who has witnessed redemption. Her story ends not in emptiness, but in abundance. The community that watched the unfolding of this remarkable story now tells it to their children and grandchildren. The narrative of Ruth and Naomi becomes part of the collective memory, a reminder that God works through ordinary people to accomplish extraordinary purposes. The names that seemed so unlikely to appear in the genealogies of Israel now take their permanent place in the records. Ruth the Moabite, Naomi the bitter, Boaz the redeemer, Obed the worshipper, each name carries the weight of story and the promise of future glory. The lineage that began with Abraham and Sarah now includes the foreign woman who chose Israel as her home. The family tree that might have ended with Naomi's empty return now branches into the future with new growth and an abundant fruit. Ruth's cultural crossing. The morning mist rises from the fields of Bethlehem as Ruth reflects on the journey that brought her to this moment. The woman who once worshipped the gods of Moab now stands among the people of Israel, her transformation complete yet her memories intact. The crossing between worlds has marked her soul in ways both seen and unseen. Ruth's accent still carries traces of her homeland, a gentle reminder of the distance she has traveled. The Hebrew words flow from her tongue with increasing fluency, but the Moabite rhythms that shaped her childhood speech remain. Her voice tells the story of two worlds meeting in one person. The customs of Israel have become second nature to Ruth, yet she remembers the different ways of her birthland. The festivals she celebrates now replace the ceremonies of her youth, but the heart that seeks the divine remains constant. Her worship has found new expression while maintaining its essential character. The women of Bethlehem no longer see Ruth as foreign, yet she carries within herself the perspective of an outsider who chose to belong. Her questions about tradition come from genuine curiosity rather than ignorance. Her understanding of Israel's ways deepens because she chose them rather than inherited them. Ruth's children grow up bilingual, though they may not realize it. The lullabies she sings carry melodies from Moab, while the stories she tells speak of Israel's God. The cultural bridge that exists within her extends to the next generation, creating a richness that pure heritage cannot provide. The laws of Israel that once seemed foreign now govern Ruth's daily life. The regulations about clean and unclean, about holy days and harvest festivals, about marriage and family, all these have become part of her identity. The external observance has shaped internal transformation. Ruth's understanding of covenant love comes from her lived experience of crossing boundaries. The hesed that binds her to Naomi and Boaz carries the weight of conscious choice. Her loyalty was not born of blood or culture, but of decision, making it perhaps more precious because it was freely given. The marketplace conversations reveal the depth of Ruth's integration into Israelite society. She haggles with merchants using the proper expressions, shares gossip with the appropriate discretion, and offers advice with the wisdom of experience. Her foreign birth has become a footnote rather than a defining characteristic. The religious practices of Israel now flow through Ruth's life like water through a familiar channel. The prayers she offers, the sacrifices she brings, the festivals she celebrates, all these have become natural expressions of her faith. The conversion of her heart has led to the conversion of her daily routine. Ruth's memories of Moab remain vivid, but no longer painful. She can speak of her homeland without the sharp edge of loss, remembering the good while embracing the better. The past has become a bridge to the present rather than a chain that binds her to regret. The children she teaches in the community learn from her unique perspective. Ruth's lessons about faithfulness carry the weight of lived experience. Her stories about choosing God over comfort resonate with those who face their own crossroads. Her life becomes a teaching tool for the next generation. The cultural foods Ruth prepares blend the flavors of both worlds. The techniques learned in her mother's kitchen in Moab now serve to feed her Israelite family. The spices and methods that once defined her foreignness now add richness to her current identity. Ruth's prayers incorporate the language of both loss and gain. She can thank God for the blessings of her new life while acknowledging the cost of leaving the old. Her worship carries the complexity of someone who has paid the price for transformation and found it worthwhile. The stories Ruth tells her grandchildren include tales from both sides of the Jordan River. The children learn about the God of Israel through the lens of someone who chose him over the familiar gods of her youth. Her testimony carries the power of authentic decision. Ruth's perspective on God's character comes from her experience of divine invitation. The deity who welcomed a foreign woman into his covenant family reveals himself as more inclusive than the gods of other nations. Her theology grows from experience rather than tradition. The seasonal rhythms of Israel have replaced those of Moab in Ruth's internal calendar. The harvest festivals, the Day of Atonement, the Passover celebration, all these now mark time in her life. The sacred calendar has become her personal calendar. Ruth's understanding of Israel's history comes from the outside looking in, giving her a unique appreciation for the narrative. The stories of Egypt and wilderness, of judges and kings, of covenant and promise, all these she learns as an adult, making her connection to them both fresh and intentional. The language of faith that Ruth uses carries the enthusiasm of a convert. Her expressions of trust in God's faithfulness come from someone who has experienced that faithfulness firsthand. Her words about divine love carry the weight of personal transformation. Ruth's identity as a daughter of Israel is complete, yet her journey to that identity remains part of her story. The woman who crossed the Jordan River in faith now stands as a bridge between peoples. Her very existence demonstrates the inclusive nature of God's grace. The legacy Ruth leaves includes the model of successful cultural crossing. Her life provides a template for others who must choose between competing loyalties. Her story shows that it is possible to honor the past while embracing the future, to maintain identity while accepting transformation. The community that once whispered about the foreign woman now points to Ruth as an example of faithful integration. Her life demonstrates that belonging comes not from birth but from choice, not from heritage but from heart commitment. She has become fully Israeli while never denying her Moabite roots. The law of the kinsman redeemer. The morning sun illuminates the ancient gate of Bethlehem as the elders take their places for the daily administration of justice. The stone seats worn smooth by generations of decision-makers hold the weight of tradition and the promise of continuity. Here, where Ruth's fate was decided, the law of the kinsman redeemer unfolds its deeper meanings. The custom reaches back to the foundations of Israel's social structure, woven into the fabric of the law given at Sinai. The kinsman redeemer serves as more than a legal convenience. He embodies the principle that no one should face destitution alone. The Goel, as he is called in Hebrew, stands as a bulwark against the erosion of family stability. The law recognizes that poverty and misfortune can strike any family, threatening not just immediate survival, but the continuation of ancestral inheritance. The kinsman redeemer steps into the breach, restoring what has been lost and ensuring that the family name continues. His actions preserve both property and posterity. The qualifications for serving as a kinsman redeemer reflect the serious nature of the responsibility. The goal must be a relative, sharing blood ties with those he seeks to help. He must possess the financial means to effect redemption, having resources sufficient to buy back what has been lost. Most importantly, he must be willing to accept the obligations that come with redemption. The process of redemption follows careful legal procedures designed to protect all parties involved. The claims of various kinsmen must be weighed according to their proximity to the distressed family. The closer the relationship, the greater the obligation, and the higher the priority. The law ensures that help comes from those most naturally positioned to provide it. The rights of the kinsman redeemer extend beyond mere property transactions. He can buy back land that has been sold due to economic hardship, ensuring that family inheritance remains within the clan. He can redeem family members who have been forced into slavery, restoring their freedom and dignity. He can marry the widow of a deceased kinsman, continuing the family line. The obligations that accompany these rights create a system of mutual responsibility. The kinsman redeemer cannot simply pick and choose which aspects of redemption appeal to him. The law binds privilege to responsibility, ensuring that those with means cannot exploit their position for personal gain alone. The economic implications of kinsman redemption create a safety net that prevents the permanent concentration of wealth in the hands of a few. The system ensures that even the poorest families retain hope of restoration. The law acknowledges that economic circumstances can change and provides mechanisms for recovery. The social dimensions of the kinsman redeemer law strengthen the bonds between family members. The knowledge that relatives stand ready to help in times of crisis creates a sense of security and belonging. The law transforms individual success into communal responsibility. The theological significance of kinsman redemption points beyond human relationships to divine character. The law reflects God's own role as the ultimate redeemer of his people. The human kinsman redeemer serves as a shadow of the divine redeemer who will one day restore all that has been lost. The application of kinsman redemption in Ruth's case demonstrates both the beauty and the complexity of the law. Boaz's willingness to redeem goes beyond legal obligation to embrace love and grace. His actions show how the law can serve not just justice, but also mercy, not just preservation, but also transformation. The closer kinsman's refusal to redeem illustrates the voluntary nature of the law. No one can be forced to serve as a kinsman redeemer against their will. The law requires willingness as well as ability, ensuring that redemption comes from the heart rather than mere compulsion. The unnamed kinsman's decision, while disappointing, remains within his rights. The symbolic removal of the sandal carries deep meaning in the kinsman redeemer tradition. The shoe represents the right to walk on the land, to take possession of property, to exercise authority. When the closer kinsman removes his sandal and hands it to Boaz, he transfers not just legal rights, but also the responsibility to act on behalf of the distressed family. The public nature of the kinsman-redeemer transaction ensures accountability and prevents future disputes. The witnesses who gather at the gate serve as living records of the agreement. Their testimony provides security for all parties involved, making the redemption legally binding and socially recognized. The blessing pronounced by the elders reveals the community's understanding of kinsman redemption as more than a business transaction. Their words invoke divine favor on the Redeemer and his family, recognizing that his actions serve God's purposes as well as human needs. The blessing transforms legal obligation into sacred calling. The kinsman-redeemer law anticipates the challenges that arise when family lines appear to be ending. The Levirate marriage provision ensures that deceased men can still father children through their brothers or close relatives. The law fights against the extinction of family names and the loss of ancestral inheritances. The protection of widows forms a crucial aspect of the kinsman-redeemer system. Women in ancient times faced particular vulnerability when their husbands died, often losing both economic support and social standing. The law provides mechanisms for their protection and restoration, ensuring that widowhood does not equal destitution. The long-term implications of kinsman redemption extend far beyond individual cases. The system helps maintain the stability of tribal allotments and prevents the permanent alienation of ancestral lands. The law serves as a guardian of Israel's covenant relationship with the land God has given them. The spiritual dimensions of kinsman redemption point toward humanity's need for divine redemption. Just as families can lose their inheritance through misfortune or poor choices, humanity has lost its spiritual inheritance through sin. The kinsman redeemer law provides a picture of how God himself will act to restore what has been lost. The requirements for the ultimate kinsman redeemer mirror those found in the human law. He must be related to those he seeks to redeem, sharing their nature and circumstances. He must possess the resources necessary for redemption, having power over the forces that have caused the loss. Most importantly, he must be willing to pay the price that redemption demands. The Book of Ruth demonstrates the kinsman-redeemer law working exactly as intended. A distressed family finds restoration through the willing action of a qualified relative. Property is recovered, family lines are continued, and the community witnesses the power of the law to transform lives. The model provided by Boaz sets a standard for all who would serve as kinsman redeemers. His careful attention to legal procedures, his generous spirit, his willingness to sacrifice for others, all these qualities mark him as an ideal goal. His example shows how the law can be fulfilled not just in letter, but in spirit. The celebration that follows the redemption reveals the community's joy when the kinsman redeemer law achieves its purpose. The restoration of one family becomes a cause for communal celebration. The law serves not just individual families, but the entire community, strengthening the social fabric through acts of redemption. Naomi's bitterness to blessing. The transformation begins in the smallest moments, like seeds of hope planted in the hardest ground. Naomi stands at her doorway watching Ruth return from the fields with her arms full of grain. The woman who once spoke of the Almighty dealing bitterly with her now sees his hand providing through the faithfulness of her daughter-in-law. The first crack in Naomi's bitterness appears when she hears Boaz's name. The memories of better days when her husband walked among the respected men of Bethlehem stir something dormant in her heart. The name carries echoes of the life she once knew, before loss became her constant companion. The plan that forms in Naomi's mind reveals the awakening of hope within her. The woman who had given up on the future suddenly begins to scheme for blessing. Her instructions to Ruth show a heart that dares to believe that the story might not be over, that redemption might still be possible. The night Ruth spends at the threshing floor becomes a vigil of prayer for Naomi. The woman who once accused God of bringing calamity now finds herself pleading for his favor. Her prayers carry the weight of desperate hope, the courage to risk disappointment for the possibility of restoration. The morning after the threshing floor encounter brings news that fills Naomi with trembling anticipation. Ruth's report of Boaz's kindness and promise ignites something that has been cold for too long. The ember of faith that seemed extinguished begins to glow again. Naomi's advice to Ruth reveals a woman rediscovering her capacity for joy. "Wait, my daughter," she says, but her own waiting has changed character. No longer the passive endurance of despair, but the active expectation of blessing. Her words carry confidence that was absent when she first returned to Bethlehem. The wedding preparations mark a turning point in Naomi's emotional journey. The woman who once prepared for burial now prepares for celebration. Her hands, so long idle with grief, now move with purpose and joy. The activities of blessing replace the rituals of mourning. The ceremony itself becomes a moment of public vindication for Naomi. The community that witnessed her bitter return now celebrates her restored joy. Their words of blessing acknowledge not just the couple's happiness, but also the grandmother's transformation. The blessing pronounced over Ruth extends to the woman who chose to love her. The months of Ruth's pregnancy bring daily reminders of God's faithfulness to Naomi. Each sign of new life growing in her daughter-in-law's womb speaks of the divine power to create something from nothing. The woman who returned empty now prepares to welcome fullness. The birth of Obed marks the completion of Naomi's transformation. The baby placed in her arms carries the weight of restoration and the promise of future blessing. The child who will be called her son represents the answer to prayers she had stopped praying. The naming of the child reveals the community's understanding of what has taken place. They do not call him Ruth's son or Boaz's son, but Naomi's son. The recognition acknowledges that this child has been born not just to continue a family line, but to restore a broken heart. The daily care of her grandson becomes Naomi's path to complete healing. The routine of feeding and comforting, of singing and storytelling, slowly rebuilds the capacity for joy that grief had damaged. Each small task becomes an act of worship, each moment of care a prayer of gratitude. The laughter that returns to Naomi's voice surprises everyone who hears it. The sound that has been absent for so long now bubbles up from depths that seem permanently sealed. The music of joy replaces the silence of sorrow, and the household comes alive with the sound of celebration. The stories Naomi tells her grandson carry a different tone than those she once told in bitterness. The same events that once seemed like evidence of divine displeasure now appear as the necessary preparation for blessing. The narrative of her life has been rewritten by the hand of grace. The prayers Naomi offers reflect her transformed understanding of God's character. The deity she once saw as adversary now appears as the orchestrator of blessing. Her words of worship carry the depth that comes only from walking through darkness into light. The energy that returns to Naomi's daily life marks the physical dimension of her restoration. The woman who once moved through her days with the weight of despair now walks with the lightness of hope. Her very posture tells the story of transformation. The relationships Naomi rebuilds with the women of Bethlehem demonstrate the social healing that has taken place. The isolation that grief had created gives way to renewed connection. The community that once pitied her now celebrates with her, and she finds herself once again part of the network of friendship and support. The future that Naomi now envisions extends far beyond her own life. The woman who once saw only endings now speaks of beginnings. The grandson in her arms represents not just her own restoration, but the continuation of a story that will echo through generations. The name that Naomi reclaims tells the final chapter of her transformation. The woman who insisted on being called Mara now accepts her original identity as Naomi, the pleasant one. The bitterness that defined her return has been sweetened by the honey of blessing. The legacy Naomi leaves includes not just the genealogical line that continues through Obed, but also the testimony of transformation. Her life becomes a witness to the power of God to restore what seems permanently lost. The woman who returned empty becomes a symbol of divine fullness. The peaceful end of Naomi's life provides a stark contrast to the bitter beginning of her return to Bethlehem. The woman who once felt abandoned by God now rests in the assurance of his faithfulness. Her final days pass in the contentment of one who has seen the completion of her story. Ruth in the line of Christ. The genealogical records of Israel flow like a river through the generations, carrying the promises of God from age to age. Within this sacred stream, Ruth's name appears as a testament to the inclusive nature of divine grace. The Moabite woman who chose Israel as her home now stands among the mothers of the Messiah. The Matthew genealogy places Ruth in the direct line of Jesus, her name appearing alongside Tamar, Rahab, and Bathsheba. These women, each carrying complex stories of faith and failure, demonstrate that God's purposes advance through human lives marked by both courage and controversy. Ruth's inclusion speaks to the divine heart that welcomes all who choose faith over fear. The significance of Ruth's Moabite heritage becomes clear when viewed through the lens of Christ's mission. The law that excluded Moabites from the assembly of the Lord for 10 generations finds its ultimate fulfillment in the one who would break down the walls of separation. Ruth's acceptance into Israel's story prefigures the gospel's reach to all nations. The love story of Ruth and Boaz provides a beautiful picture of the relationship between Christ and his church. The foreign woman who finds refuge under the wings of Israel's God mirrors the Gentile church that finds salvation through Israel's Messiah. The kinsman redeemer who chooses to redeem becomes a type of the ultimate redeemer who would come. The child born to Ruth and Boaz carries within his lineage the promise of kingship and the hope of salvation. Obed's birth marks not just the continuation of a family line, but the advancement of God's redemptive plan. The baby who brings joy to Naomi's heart carries the seed of humanity's ultimate joy. The pathway from Ruth to David traces the genealogical line that will culminate in Christ. Each generation builds upon the foundation laid by the faithful decisions of those who came before. Ruth's choice to follow Naomi becomes part of the chain that leads to the birth of the Savior. The character traits that mark Ruth's life, loyalty, faith, humility, and sacrificial love, find their ultimate expression in Christ. The woman who gave up everything to follow God's people points toward the one who would give up everything to redeem God's people. Her story becomes a shadow of the greater story to come. The harvest fields where Ruth gleaned provide a prophetic picture of the spiritual harvest that Christ would accomplish. The grain that sustained her physical life points toward the bread of life that would sustain eternal life. The provision found in earthly fields anticipates the eternal provision found in Christ. The midnight encounter at the threshing floor carries messianic significance that extends beyond the romantic elements of the story. Ruth's approach to Boaz in faith and vulnerability mirrors the soul's approach to Christ in repentance and trust. The covering she requests speaks of the righteousness that believers find in their Redeemer. The public redemption at the city gate foreshadows the public nature of Christ's redemptive work. The witnesses who gather to observe the transaction represent the cosmic audience that watches the drama of salvation unfold. The sandal that passes between kinsmen symbolizes the authority that transfers from law to grace. The blessing pronounced by the elders carries prophetic weight that extends to the ultimate offspring of Ruth's line. Their words about Rachel and Leah building the house of Israel find their fulfillment in the one who would build the spiritual house of all believers. The blessing reaches beyond the immediate couple to encompass all who would be blessed through their descendant. The transformation of Ruth from foreign gleaner to honored mother parallels the transformation of believers from strangers to children of God. Her journey from the fields of Moab to the genealogy of Christ illustrates the gospel's power to take the outsider and make them family. Her story becomes every believer's story. The name Ruth, meaning friendship or companion, takes on deeper significance when seen in the context of Christ's lineage. The woman who became a friend to Naomi and bride to Boaz points toward the one who would call his followers friends and make them his bride. Her very name speaks of the intimate relationship that the gospel makes possible. The book of Ruth's placement in the Hebrew canon between Judges and Samuel provides literary context for understanding its messianic implications. The story serves as a bridge between the chaos of the Judges period and the establishment of the monarchy. Ruth's great-great-grandson David will become the king whose throne will be established forever. The emphasis on Ruth's righteousness throughout the narrative points toward the righteousness that would be fulfilled in Christ. Her character shines as a beacon of faithfulness in an age marked by moral compromise. The woman who follows God's law from the heart anticipates the one who would fulfill the law perfectly. The love that motivates Ruth's actions, love for Naomi, love for Boaz, love for the God of Israel, reflects the love that motivates Christ's work of redemption. The self-sacrificial nature of her devotion provides a human picture of the divine love that would be demonstrated on the cross. The provision that surrounds Ruth's story, the grain in the fields, the protection from harm, the kinsman redeemer's care, speaks of the comprehensive provision that believers find in Christ. The physical blessings that mark her earthly story point toward the spiritual blessings that mark the believer's eternal story. The restoration that Ruth's loyalty brings to Naomi's life parallels the restoration that Christ's sacrifice brings to humanity's relationship with God. The empty woman who becomes full again through Ruth's faithfulness illustrates the way that divine grace can restore what sin has destroyed. The legacy that flows from Ruth's decision to follow Naomi extends far beyond her own lifetime to encompass the eternal kingdom of Christ. The choice made on a dusty road in Moab reverberates through history to the moment when the Word becomes flesh. Her story becomes part of the greatest story ever told. The ultimate significance of Ruth's place in Christ's lineage lies not in her perfection, but in her faith. The woman who chose to trust in the God of Israel despite her foreign birth demonstrates that salvation comes not through heritage, but through faith. Her inclusion in the messianic line proclaims that the gospel is for all who believe, a love rooted in redemption. The final threads of Ruth's story weave together in a tapestry that displays the beauty of love rooted in redemption. The narrative that began with famine and death concludes with harvest and new life, demonstrating the power of faithful love to transform even the most desperate circumstances into occasions for blessing. The love between Ruth and Naomi transcends the boundaries of blood and culture, creating a bond that proves stronger than the natural ties of kinship. Their relationship demonstrates that the deepest connections form not through shared genetics, but through shared commitment. The love that chooses to stay when leaving would be easier becomes the foundation upon which all other blessings build. The pattern of redemption that runs through Ruth's story reveals the divine heart that refuses to abandon those who seem abandoned. The God who provides grain in the fields and favor in the eyes of the kinsman redeemer shows himself to be the ultimate source of all redemption. Human love becomes the instrument through which divine love operates. The transformation that marks every character in the story speaks to the power of redemptive love to change lives. Ruth moves from widow to wife, from foreigner to daughter of Israel, from gleaner to honored mother. Naomi transitions from bitter to blessed, from empty to full, from grieving to celebrating. Boaz evolves from bachelor to husband, from landowner to kinsman redeemer, from individual to patriarch. The sacrificial nature of the love displayed in Ruth's story provides a picture of the ultimate sacrifice that would be made for humanity's redemption. Ruth's willingness to leave everything familiar for the sake of love, Boaz's choice to redeem at personal cost, Naomi's acceptance of love when she felt unworthy, all these point toward the greater love that would be demonstrated on the cross. The inclusive character of the redemption accomplished in Ruth's story breaks down the barriers that separate peoples and cultures. The Moabite woman who becomes a mother in Israel demonstrates that God's love extends beyond the boundaries of nation and race. The story anticipates the gospel's reach to all corners of the earth. The timing of redemption in Ruth's story reveals the perfect coordination of divine providence. The famine that drives the family to Moab, the deaths that create the need for redemption, the harvest that provides opportunity for gleaning, the presence of the kinsman redeemer who is both able and willing. All these elements combine in perfect timing to bring about restoration. The joy that fills the final scenes of Ruth's story reflects the joy that redemption always brings. The celebration that marks Obed's birth, the laughter that returns to Naomi's voice, the contentment that settles over the household. All these speak of the deep satisfaction that comes when love accomplishes its redemptive purpose. The legacy that flows from Ruth's story extends far beyond the immediate characters to encompass generations yet unborn. The child who brings joy to his grandmother's heart will become the grandfather of a king. The decision made in love on a foreign road will echo through history to the birth of the Savior. The hope that sustains the characters through their darkest moments finds its vindication in the story's conclusion. The faith that leads Ruth to choose an uncertain future over a secure past, the trust that enables Naomi to return to a place of painful memories, the confidence that motivates Boaz to risk rejection, all these acts of hope prove justified by the outcome. The community that witnesses Ruth's story becomes part of the redemptive process through their acceptance and blessing. The women who celebrate Obed's birth, the men who witness the transaction at the gate, the entire town that embraces the foreign woman, all play crucial roles in the unfolding of redemption. The simplicity of the story's elements, grain fields and threshing floors, city gates and family gatherings, demonstrates that redemption operates through ordinary circumstances. The divine purpose advances through harvest routines and marriage customs, through legal procedures and family celebrations. The sacred infiltrates the secular to accomplish its purposes. The completeness of the redemption achieved in Ruth's story leaves no loose ends, no unresolved conflicts, no bitter residues. The family that seemed destined for extinction flourishes with new life. The property that appeared lost returns to its rightful owners. The love that risked everything receives its reward. The biblical placement of Ruth's story provides context for understanding its theological significance. Positioned between the chaos of the Judges period and the establishment of the monarchy, the book shows how faithful love can create order from confusion, hope from despair, blessing from curse. The literary artistry of Ruth's story enhances its emotional impact and theological message. The careful construction of scenes, the development of character, the building of tension toward resolution, all these elements serve to highlight the beauty of redemptive love and its power to transform lives. The universal themes that emerge from Ruth's story, loyalty and betrayal, loss and restoration, love and sacrifice, speak to the human condition across cultures and centuries. The specific details of ancient Israelite life carry truths that transcend their historical context to address the deepest needs of the human heart. The mystery that surrounds the ultimate purposes of Ruth's story adds depth to its meaning. The characters cannot see the full significance of their actions, yet they act in faith and love. The story demonstrates that redemption often works through people who cannot perceive its ultimate goals, but choose to act faithfully in their immediate circumstances. The beauty that emerges from the ashes of Ruth's early losses testifies to the creative power of redemptive love. The story that begins with 3 graves in Moab concludes with new life in Bethlehem. The narrative that opens with bitter tears closes with joyful celebration. The love that chooses to redeem transforms tragedy into triumph. The eternal significance of Ruth's story lies in its demonstration that love rooted in redemption can overcome any obstacle, bridge any gap, heal any wound. The foreign woman who becomes a mother in Israel, the bitter widow who becomes a joyful grandmother, the honorable man who becomes a kinsman redeemer, all testify to the power of love to accomplish the impossible. The final word of Ruth's story is not judgment but mercy, not condemnation but grace, not hopelessness, but redemption. The love that roots itself in the willingness to sacrifice for others creates the conditions in which divine blessing can flourish. The story ends not with an ending, but with a beginning, not with closure, but with opening, not with death, but with life abundant and eternal.